Chapter 2835 2835 Rongyang Attacks. Chapter 2835 2835 Rongyang Attacks. 2835 Rongyang Attacks. So after Jiwu Heavenly Venerate fled, he immediately went to the Lin clan. As representative of a 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate, and as a 4th-tier himself, Rongyang naturally was a valued guest of the Lin clan, and had been allocated an extremely elegant courtyard. Spiritual qi had solidified here, and celestial medicines were growing like they were ordinary flowers. Knock, knock, knock. Jiwu Heavenly Venerate knocked on the courtyard doors. The doors were clearly open, but he did not dare to enter without an invitation. Rongyang was a 4th-tier Heavenly Venerate, someone capable of suppressing Jiwu single-handedly, and the present world was too chaotic. Jiwu Heavenly Venerate would also have to cozy up to the powerful Rong clan, so he was naturally even more respectful. Enter. A clear voice rang out from inside. Jiwu Heavenly Venerate entered, and he had not walked too far before he saw a white-robed young man sitting on the stone stool in the garden while sipping on tea leisurely. He was Rongyang, the only son of the 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate Rong Tianyu. He had astonishing natural talent, and was already a 4th-tier after cultivating for no more than 7 epochs. Even Jiwu Heavenly Venerate was envious of him because he was still only a 1st-tier Heavenly Venerate even after cultivating for several dozen epochs. At present, though Jiwu Heavenly Venerate had already reached the 3rd tier, his accumulation of power for the advancement was already expended. Unless he could obtain a large number of Heavenly Venerable seals, there was no way he could advance any further from this. Greetings, Lord Rong. Jiwu Heavenly Venerate clasped his hands in respect. Heavenly Venerate was only the name of a whole group, but with differences in cultivation level, there was naturally an absolute difference in status. Rongyang nodded slightly, and was still sipping on his tea as he asked calmly, "What has happened?" "Rong Xinquan is dead." Jiwu Heavenly Venerate bowed his head slightly. Rongyang immediately raised a brow. Boom! An aura spread out from him, and all the celestial medicines within his vicinity immediately wilted simultaneously. They had not been killed by his power. Instead, it was because his aura was too strong, so even celestial medicines could not bear it. Jiwu Heavenly Venerate also felt a slight suffocation in his heart, feeling pain that made him have an urge to cough up blood. He related the events that had occurred completely and did not twist anything. However, he did leave out the process of how he had egged Rong Xinquan on, and emphasized that Rong Xinquan had only gone there so he could obtain the Heavenly Venerable seal for Rongyang's sake. Rongyang was silent, but very soon the air around him bubbled, and then shattered as multiple tiny holes leading into the void appeared. Jiwu Heavenly Venerate couldn't help but feel inwardly shocked. He naturally could also tear a rip into the void if he went all out, but he definitely could not have done it as casually as Rongyang had. A 4th tier was a 4th tier, even if Rongyang was only an early-stage 4th tier. Since you went with Xinquan, why had you not managed to protect him? Rongyang finally spoke. This is my fault. Jiwu Heavenly Venerate bowed his head, making no excuses. He had long since expected this. No matter how well he threw the blame off of himself, Rong Xinquan had still died, so Jiwu definitely would have to bear some responsibility. Thus, he offered no excuses, and directly admitted to his fault. Rongyang looked meaningfully at him, and did not continue to reprimand him. As long as they were Heavenly Venerates, they were standing in the ranks at the peak, so how could they be easily insulted? Though it was very easy for Heavenly Venerates to die now, there were just so many of them. One more dying meant the number would decrease by 1, and who knew, maybe even the average number of Heavenly Venerates would actually be lower than the number of dimensions after another epoch. If they wanted to conquer the world, every single Heavenly Venerate was an important source of battle prowess. Rongyang thought for a moment, and then said, That Ling Han, is he the one that has repeatedly broken records in the past at the realm battlefield? Yes, Jiwu Heavenly Venerate answered. By now, there was no need for him to hide anything. He only had to tell the truth. Of course, there was absolutely no way he would take the initiative to mention his old grudges with Ling Han. Able to match a third tier when he himself is only a first tier? This is truly shocking. Even if it was Xian Chihu and Lin Yulian. Have they been able to do the same? Rong Yang murmured to himself. He shook his head. At the very least, it was definitely impossible for him to do so. In fact, he could not even fight one that was a tier higher than himself, because he had only condensed over 30 powers of dimension. He was indeed stronger than heavenly venerates of the same level, but his strength was still limited. Producing 3 freaks from the same clan? I truly would like to take a look for myself. He finally stood. Whatever the case, there was no way Rong Xinquan could die for nothing. The Ling clan had to give Rong Yang an explanation, and give the Rong clan an explanation, because the Rong clan could not afford such humiliation. Lead the way, he said. Yes, Jiwu Heavenly Venerate said, his head bowed, a sliver of a smile appearing at the corners of his lips. He had sacrificed his pride, almost becoming a dog for Rong Xinquan, and it was finally time for him to reap his rewards. Lord Rong. However, the two of them had not even stepped outside when a servant of the Lin clan entered and bowed to Rong Yang. My master requests Lord Rong to meet him. Rong Yang couldn't help but falter. This so-called master was naturally Lin Xiaoyang. Previously, Lin Xiaoyang had been in seclusion all this while, and had not managed to take out time to grant him an audience. However, a 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate was qualified to make Rong Yang wait, but the latter was not worthy to have a 6th-tier Heavenly Venerate wait for him, allowing him to settle his own matters first. Hence, after faltering momentarily, he nodded. Please lead the way. In any case, the Ling clan would not be moving, so there was no rush. Rong Yang first went to meet Lin Xiaoyang, but he had not expected that Lin Xiaoyang would actually talk with him for 3 days and 3 nights, confirming some details of their cooperation, and only then was he allowed to leave. Once he returned to his quarters, Rong Yang summoned Jiwu Heavenly Venerate, and they charged towards Ling City. He knew that Ling City was a secondary city of the Lin clan, but he did not care. Compared with the alliance with the Ling clan, what was a mere 3rd-tier battle prowess worth? He was sure that, even if he eliminated every single person in the Ling clan, Lin Xiaoyang would only reprimand him with a few words at most. In just a short while, the 2 great Heavenly Venerates arrived at Ling City. In comparison, Rong Yang was much more domineering. He directly released the aura belonging to the Heavenly Venerable tier, which enshrouded the entire Ling City. However, what made him gloomy was that though everyone in Ling City was trembling under the suppression of his aura, not one of them actually panicked too much. Fuck, what was going on here? What he did not know was that Zhang Kailuan had repeatedly come to Ling City to challenge Ling Han, so this Heavenly Venerable tier aura was really nothing much for the people of Ling City. Though even a 9th heaven celestial king was not capable of bearing the aura of a Heavenly Venerate, while they physically could not bear it, they were indeed mentally used to it. Rong Yang couldn't be bothered to think too deeply about the reason behind this. He did not care. Ling Han, come out and see me, he demanded. Scram! Only this voice rang out from within the city. It was the Tsundra Empress. Those that dare to say this to me either have not been born yet, or are already dead. Rong Yang sneered and moved directly, his hand moving to enshrouding the whole Ling City. Wang, a delicate hand stretched out, instantly turning into a colossal palm that covered the skies, meeting his incoming strike. Boom! The 2 giant hands clashed together, and the delicate hand immediately shattered. Rong Yang's giant hand descended, continuing to press down on Ling City. Wang. One after another, giant hands or clawed hands were launched from within the city in response to Rong Yang's giant hand. Pung, 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 pung. These attacks were like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, immediately crumbling when they collided with Rong Yang's giant hand. However, the number of these attacks was impressive. When Rong Yang's giant hand finally landed, the destruction caused was also very limited. Boom! The entire city was trembling wildly, and large numbers of buildings collapsed, but it did not cause a very great scale of destruction. After all, the Empress's first attack had already dispersed at least 30% of the force behind Rong Yang's strike. Rong Yang was surprised. He had not imagined that there would actually be so many heavenly venerates within Ling City. But it was fine. Even the strongest elite among these heavenly venerates was only a third tier. Chapter 2836. 2836 Outmatched. Chapter 2836. 2836 Outmatched. 2836 Outmatched. Why were there so many heavenly venerates in Ling City? Very coincidentally, the Rain Emperor, Ji Wuming, the Karmic Life Heavenly Venerable, and other elites had just ended their adventures and happened to return just the day before. Xiao, xiao, xiao! One after another, figures shot out from within the city, standing proudly in midair. The Karmic Life Heavenly Venerable, Ji Wuming, the Rain Emperor, Huofarong, the large black dog, as well as the Empress, all of them either first tier or second tier heavenly venerates. The one with the highest cultivation level among them was the Karmic Life Heavenly Venerable, who was already a third tier. After all, he was nurtured from the heaven and earth, and he had already surpassed everyone by nature. Bunch of pushovers. Rong Yang was completely unconcerned. He was a fourth tier, and if he went all out, then even if these people joined forces, they would still be no match for him. Did you hear me? Scram! The Empress shouted lightly. Rong Yang glanced at her, and his eyes involuntarily lit up. The Empress's grace and beauty was too captivating, and even he couldn't help but feel his heart move. However, he was a fourth tier after all, so how could he so easily become enraptured by beauty? Lord Rong, this is the murderer who killed Rong Xingquan, Ju Heavenly Venerate said in a timely manner. Rong Yang nodded and showed a hint of surprise. Though he had long since guessed it, he had not imagined that the Empress would actually be so beautiful and graceful. His expression became menacing. You are quite bold to dare to kill even a member of our Rong clan. So what if I killed him? Why are you spouting so much nonsense? If you continue to be chatty, I will slaughter you as well, the Empress declared impatiently. She could not be bothered to say that it was Rong Xingquan who had taken the initiative to kill a member of the Ling clan first. What did it matter? If she wanted to kill him, then she would. How brazen! Rong Yang shook his head. It was this woman who had committed the crime, and now she was actually still so arrogant even after seeing him. Did she think that she was a supreme elite of the seventh tier? He stood in the skies, looking down on all of them. You! Bind yourself, then head to our Rong clan for discipline. Then ask Ling Han to come out and surrender the Heavenly Venerable Seal, and this matter. I can also let this go. This was the territory of the Lin clan after all, and he was not a self-centered guy like Rong Xingquan either. Hence, he left a bit of allowance, and did not want to do something like massacring the entire city. Scram! The Empress sent out a palm strike, the force turning into a jade-like giant palm that covered the heaven and earth. How dare you? Rong Yang was really outraged. A mere second tier. So what if she possessed third tier battle prowess? In front of a fourth tier, she should still be utterly respectful. He moved as well, moving to suppress the Empress. When a fourth tier moved, how could third tier battle prowess match it? The Karmic Life Heavenly Venerable, Ji Wuming, and the others all moved, joining forces with the Empress against Rong Yang. Boom! 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 All the heavenly venerates were battling fiercely in the skies, blasting the heaven and earth till it turned pale, stretches of space collapsing one after another. However, even if the Empress and the others had an advantage in numbers, faced with absolute power, they were still outmatched and suppressed by Rongyang single-handedly. Every single one of them was in dire straits. They had already gone all out, using heavenly venerable seals, precious tools, and secret techniques one after another. But faced with Rongyang's invincible power, they could only continuously sustain heavy injuries. Including the Empress, all of them were covered with injuries. They were only still standing with mere force of will, and that was the only reason why they had not collapsed. However, no matter how strong the willpower could not last, there would eventually come a time when willpower was no longer enough. "You all have angered me," Rongyang declared menacingly. Faced with a fourth-tier elite, these people actually did not have the slightest bit of respect, which caused killing intent to grow within him. "Die." He sent out a palm strike. Pa! He was instantly sent flying, a mist of blood spraying out from all over his body as he directly dropped out of the skies. This was because the Empress and the others had joined forces to block a portion of the power. Otherwise, how could a first tier survive the attack of a fourth tier? Next, Rongyang set his eyes on Ji Wuming. He did not care that his attack had not killed Yi. What he wanted was to crush all of them. Pum! No one could stop it, and Ji Wuming was also sent flying, one of his arms directly ripped off with the powerful force. It was like Rongyang was a demonic god. He was so powerful that every move possessed invincible might, beating the Empress, the karmic life heavenly venerable, and the others to the point of severe damage and injury. Everyone couldn't help but feel hopeless. The gap in strength was too wide. This was not something that mere numbers could make up for. If they wanted to use numbers to compensate for this gap, their numbers would have to be multiplied by another tenfold, at least. The higher the cultivation level, the wider the gap in strength would be among heavenly venerates. Having mastered one additional or one less fundamental power of the Genesis world would really indicate much too great a gap. Where was the Lin clan? Could it be that they were just sitting by and watching Rongyang wreak havoc? In the distance, "Father, are you really not planning to interfere?" Lin Piaoxua asked. Lin Xiaoyang smiled. "There is no need for me to interfere. But don't worry, I can already sense it. That brat is about to come out of seclusion." Lin Xiaoyang interrupted what his daughter had been about to say. "Furthermore, it will also be beneficial for these people to experience a life-threatening danger." Lin Piaoxua nodded. She naturally trusted her father's judgment. If he said that Ling Han was about to come out of seclusion, it was definite that Ling Han would soon be coming out of seclusion. After going through as long as 20 billion years of harsh cultivation, Ling Han had finally pushed his cultivation level to peak stage first tier. He was now qualified to attempt breaking through to the second tier. This is still first tier. From second tier onwards, not only do I have to cultivate the 6 fundamental powers, I also have to continue improving my powers of dimension. There is no doubt that my speed will be even more slowed down. Ling Han sighed, but he set this matter aside soon afterwards. Even if he was slow, how could it be that he would choose not to break through? To other heavenly venerates, the difficulty of advancing from the first tier to second tier was actually more or less the same level of difficulty as a 9th heaven advancing to the heavenly venerable tier. It was all beginning from 0 and was extremely difficult, but for Ling Han, this was indeed a small matter. It was because he had long since been able to sense void particles and used void particle energy to temper his physique, which allowed him to become incredibly freakish even just as a celestial king. Now, all he had to do was extract void particle energy again and convert it for his own use. He could also directly draw upon it for his use. Whoa! His consciousness spread out in the heaven and earth and instantly got hold of countless void particles. The higher his cultivation level was, the stronger his divine sense would naturally be, and also the wider the heaven and earth he could come into contact with. It was just like his divine sense was a net. The wider the net was stretched, the more fish would be naturally captured void particles were these fishes. Come on, come on. Whoa. Ling Han's figure trembled. His consciousness had actually split, and a portion had entered into an unknown space. He immediately realized that this was the void. Boom! The void was extremely violent. This was because there was no substance here, and the only thing here was the 6 great fundamental powers. The 6 fundamental powers of void particles, constant particles, mesotron particles, receive particles, rainbow particles, and quark particles were all within. But Ling Han could only sense one of these at the moment. What was going on here? He had clearly not sent his consciousness into the void. So how did he suddenly end up in the void? Aside from being stunned, Ling Han also felt an inconceivable terror. This meant that he was unable to perfectly control himself, and great trouble would ensue. All of a sudden, a sense of indescribable fear rose up inside his heart. In the void, a black chain suddenly lashed out at him. No, it was probably more accurate to call it a tentacle. Hysteria. Ling Han immediately came to his senses. But why was it so coincidental? His consciousness had just entered the void, and hysteria had already traced him. There was absolutely no way he could match hysteria, and he hurriedly withdrew, his consciousness frantically. Shio! His consciousness retreated from the void. Just a little bit more, and hysteria's tentacle would have touched him. Chapter 2837. 2837 Ling Han versus Rongyang. Chapter 2837. 2837 Ling Han versus Rongyang. 2837 Ling Han versus Rongyang. Ling Han sighed in relief, layers of cold sweat covering his body. So strange. Why was it that he kept bumping into hysteria? He paused slightly and sensed a powerful aura, as well as the feelings of anxiety and terror that were exuding from the Empress and the others. There was an enemy. He was both furious and shocked. This was the ancestral grounds of the Lin clan. How could they have met with an enemy attack here? But the Empress and the others were in danger. So what time would he have to ponder on this problem? He immediately rose up and directly traversed through the space, flying into the air. Boom! Rongyang's palm was just about to strike the Empress when he felt a frightening aura assail him, causing him to shiver. He hurriedly withdrew his attack and became serious because he had a feeling that if the other party landed an attack on him, he would not be able to block it with the power of his defense. Ling City actually had such a powerful elite. Ling Han, Brother Ling, 4th brother. The Empress and the others all exclaimed in surprise. In their eyes, once Ling Han appeared, anything and everything could be easily resolved. So you are Ling Han? Rongyang set his eyes on Ling Han. Clang! The heaven and earth reacted, and were just about to unleash a great tribulation to blast Ling Han madly. Rongyang knew that Ling Han had previously been only a 1st tier, so he should have just advanced to the 2nd tier by now. A mere 2nd tier was actually capable of making him feel threatened. Rongyang recalled how Ling Han had been able to match 3rd tiers when he himself was only in 1st tier. Could it be that he was able to match a 4th tier now that he had advanced to the 2nd tier? It should be known that even if anyone condensed several dozen or even over 100 powers of dimension in the 1st tier and was capable of crushing his peers of the same cultivation level, this advantage would actually be slowly reduced as cultivation level increased. That was because the increase in strength with every step taken at the Heavenly Venerable tier was really much, much too great. As a simple example, when one was in the 1st tier, the ratio of strength would be 10-1, but every step further would be an increase of 10 or 100 points of battle prowess. In that case, though there would still be a gap, this gap would undoubtedly become smaller and smaller. Hence, even if Ling Han could match a 3rd tier when he was in the 1st tier, His battle prowess at the same cultivation level would definitely decline considerably after he advanced to the second tier. If he could still fight against an opponent who had an advantage of 2 cultivation levels over him, that would be too inconceivable. Hence, Rongyang was very confused about that feeling that he had just felt. Why would he feel wary of someone who had just broken through to the second tier? This was unbelievable to him. Boom! However, what responded to him was not Ling Han's words, but rather his fist, which was filled with dominance and fury. There was also an indescribably grand aura, as if this whole world, no, the entire Genesis world, could be destroyed with a single blow. Rongyang brandished a fist in response. Pum! Great power collided, and both of them trembled before simultaneously flying backwards. Clearly, their power was within the same level. 4th tier, this was indeed the power of the 4th tier. Rongyang steadied his footing. You are truly overbearing. You have killed one of our Rong clan, yet are not showing the slightest bit of apology. Instead, you are just acting forceful. Ling Han's gaze swept over, and he had already spotted Juwu, Heavenly Venerate. Though he did not know how things had happened, he could already guess. This had to have something to do with Juwu, Heavenly Venerate. No need for so much nonsense. We fight first. Ling Han rushed forwards. They actually dared attack his wife, friends, and brothers, so even if he did not kill Rongyang, he was determined to beat him into a pulp. Rongyang had no choice but to parry, and exchanged blows with Ling Han. Their power was within the same level, but it was still Rongyang that was slightly stronger. After all, his cultivation level was early stage 4th tier, and added with how he had fused over 30 powers of dimension when he had been in the 1st tier, his battle prowess was comparable to late stage 4th tier, which was naturally stronger than Ling Han. But after Ling Han started using Fists of Fury, his disadvantage was immediately reversed. This was a Heavenly Venerate technique that Ling Han had invented himself, and was most suited for him, pushing his battle prowess to the late stage of the 4th tier, which was enough to match Rongyang. No, the fist intent of Fists of Fury was mad fury, and the present Ling Han was in a state of utter fury. Every blow he delivered was above standard. In fact, it was battle prowess that was close to the peak stage of the 4th tier, so Rongyang had no choice but to use a Heavenly Venerate technique in response as well. Now the two were evenly matched. As the two of them fought, their anger was also rising. They both drew their Heavenly Venerate tools and boosted their battle prowess with Heavenly Venerable seals. A blurred seal flickered on Rongyang's forehead, his battle prowess immediately soaring over a dozen times. This was clearly not one of the more widely known 7 seals. As for whether Rongyang himself had obtained it through comprehension, or obtained it from a historical site, or it had been severed from Rong Tianyu's mind and passed on to his son, it was unclear. Ling Han was not willing to show weakness, either. He similarly channeled a Heavenly Venerable seal. This was not one of the 13 seals that he had previously gotten, but rather one that had automatically appeared in his mind when he had just broken through to the 2nd tier. The 14th Heavenly Venerable seal. 1. Ling Han's battle prowess immediately soared by 29 times. This was extremely frightening. It should be known that any solitary seal, even if it was the 8th seal, could only boost his battle prowess by 27 times, and it was only after combining the 4 direction seals that allowed his battle prowess to increase by 39 times, which had surpassed this 14th seal. Most importantly, this 14th seal was actually still incomplete, just like how the 8th seal had previously been. Then, after it was mended, just how many times would it increase his battle prowess? 40 times? 50 times? Ling Han unleashed a battle cry, his right hand throwing out a fist of fury, while his left hand was striking out with the divine demon sword, pushing his battle prowess to the extreme. In this manner, the gap between them was obvious. Rongyang was outmatched. Rongyang could not accept this. He, A dignified 4th-tier Heavenly Venerate was actually no match for a 2nd-tier Heavenly Venerate. He knew that this primarily was because the level of the Heavenly Venerable Seal that Ling Han had mastered was superior, and it was not just a little bit superior at that, but rather a lot more superior. He gritted his teeth and forged on. Heavenly Venerable Seals could only release energy for 2 hours. As long as he could weather this period of time, he did not believe that Ling Han would have another high-level Heavenly Venerable Seal. By that time, he would definitely be able to turn tables around. That was because he was a noble, dignified 4th-tier Heavenly Venerate. How could the number of high-level Heavenly Venerable Seals he had mastered be less than Ling Han's? Pung! A heavy punch landed on Rongyang, and he felt his face ache and burn hotly. This infuriated him, and he released a loud roar. However, it was useless. Pung, pung, pung. Rongyang continuously sustained blows. The power of Ling Han's fists was too overwhelming. Every blow caused Rongyang's body to tremble, and even his bones were close to breaking. Gritting his teeth, he forged onwards. How could it be that he would not be able to last even 2 hours? The Empress and the others all felt gratified to see this. All of them had been seriously wounded by Rongyang, and they naturally felt pleased to see Rongyang suffering a beating now. However, Rongyang's tenacity was truly astonishing. He actually managed to forcefully last 2 hours. Haha, do you still have such high-level Heavenly Venerable Seals? Rongyang laughed loudly. He thought that this was the Heavenly Venerable Seal that Ling Han had obtained from the realm battlefield and which had been nurtured from the blood, flesh, and essence of countless 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerates, so it was normal for it to have such a high level. It's my turn now. Rongyang had also exhausted a Heavenly Venerable Seal, and immediately added another. Though it was not as astounding as that first one, it still helped his battle prowess to soar to 14 times his normal. Pung! He exchanged a single blow with Ling Han, and his whole person was instantly sent flying backwards. What? Rongyang was dumbfounded. Why was his battle prowess still outmatched? How could a Heavenly Venerate that had just barely advanced to the 2nd tier possibly possess more than one high-level Heavenly Venerable Seal? Chapter 2838. 2838 Taking Down Ju, Heavenly Venerate. Chapter 2838. 2838 Taking Down Ju, Heavenly Venerate. 2838 Taking Down Ju, Heavenly Venerate. I will forge on again. Rongyang was fuming inwardly. He didn't believe that Ling Han had mastered more high-level Heavenly Venerable Seals than himself. As long as he could persevere until Ling Han's high-level Heavenly Venerable Seals were used up, it would be his turn to show his might. Pung, 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 pung. Rongyang continued to endure the beating, and was being so brutally pummeled that he soon became severely wounded and was bleeding heavily. With maimed limbs, it was a miserable situation. But for a Heavenly Venerate, as long as his life force wasn't wounded and the mind wasn't obliterated, then everything could recover very quickly. This had leaped out of the range of regulations. The fundamental power of the Genesis world has an incomparably miraculous effect. However, this merely made Rongyang more capable of enduring a beating. Another hour later, Rongyang was filled with anticipation as he was going to fight back. Wang. Ling Han channeled the 9th seal again. The 2 Heavenly Venerable Seals which were being channeled earlier emerged on their own when he had broken through to the next cultivation level, while the 9th seal was obtained from the realm battlefield, condensed from the flesh and blood of countless 3rd-tier Heavenly Venerates. The power boost of the 9th seal was only 15 times, which was far inferior to the 27 times of the 8th seal and the 29 times of the 14th seal. But Rongyang, who had also used 2 high-level Heavenly Venerable Seals, felt immense pressure. The 3rd Heavenly Venerable Seal that he used could only boost his power by 13 times, although he was already at the same level as Ling Han. Being inferior meant just that there was nothing else to be said about it. Therefore, he was still at a disadvantage. It was just that the frequency of him getting beaten was much less. Rongyang was about to lose his mind. Who exactly was the fourth tier Heavenly Venerate here? He snarled, but this did not reverse his position of disadvantage at all, and he was still getting beaten. But one really had to admit his toughness. He was still fighting tenaciously after being beaten like this. Ling Han couldn't help but nod. Top prodigies were indeed extraordinary, at least in terms of willpower. Each one was just as tenacious and unyielding. Indeed, that meant Ling Han could beat him up to his heart's content. Another hour later, Rongyang's eyes became dead serious. Do you still have any high-level Heavenly Venerable Seal left? I will let you see the true power of my background. 1. The 8 seals on his back glowed simultaneously channeling 8 Heavenly Venerable Seals. He must have gone crazy. The power of a Heavenly Venerable Seal couldn't be superimposed in any way. Nevertheless, Ling Han's eyes narrowed. Of course, Rongyang wasn't such a fool, and therefore the fact that he was channeling 8 seals simultaneously could only prove one point. He had mastered combination seals. 8 seals, this was truly amazing. Boom! Rongyang unleashed a strike, which actually caught Ling Han by surprise. It wasn't that the power was too great, but rather too weak. It merely increased his power by about a dozen times. Those were 8 Heavenly Venerable Seals. Ling Han thought for a while and finally understood. These ought to be 8 low-level Heavenly Venerable Seals. Didn't Lin Luo divide the Heavenly Venerable Seals into 9 grades? Then this ought to be the 9th grade, whereby the boost of each Heavenly Venerable Seal was below 10 times. So the combination of 8 seals would boost the power to around a dozen times. One couldn't underestimate them, as these were originally 9th grade Heavenly Venerable Seals, but after combining them, they would advance to the 8th grade, which was already quite extraordinary. Rongyang was exceptionally confident. Ling Han had used up 3 Heavenly Venerable Seals, one of 8th grade and 2 of 7th grade. Even if there were more, they would at most be of the 8th grade. His combination seals had increased his power by 19 times, close to the 7th grade. It could definitely suppress Ling Han's next Heavenly Venerable Seal. Oh, this background isn't too bad. Ling Han shook his head, and when he punched out, the skull, pelvis, arm bones, and leg bones glowed simultaneously, with each part having a flickering seal and exuding a supreme domineering aura despite being blurred. Boom! With a punch, for divine beasts appeared and turned solid, which was extremely terrifying. What? Rongyang was taken aback. The current Ling Han had suddenly raised his power to a height that he could only look up to. Not to mention Ling Han, even a single divine beast had the battle prowess to crush him. Fuck! Ling Han actually had also mastered the combination seals, and his level far exceeded his own mastery. Just 4 of them already increased his power by more than 30 times, leading to an absolute suppression upon Rongyang. After experiencing a succession of heavy blows, Rongyang finally couldn't sustain it anymore. He was violently beaten and fell down from the sky. Pung! He fell heavily onto the ground, and his body directly smashed open a deep hole into the ground, and one couldn't even see its bottom. Ling Han's figure descended. The 4 seals disappeared, and he turned his gaze towards Juwu, Heavenly Venerate. Juwu couldn't help it when his heart shrank all of a sudden. He knew that Ling Han was extremely freakish, which was the reason why he wanted to kill Ling Han so badly no matter what. However, he never thought that Ling Han's drive would be so strong, not only surpassing himself, but also easily suppressing Rongyang, a 4th tier. What to do? What to do? Sweat involuntarily dripped from Jiawu's forehead. He had experienced countless crises in his lifetime. Before he became a Heavenly Venerate, things weren't smooth sailing for him as well, but he managed to resolve them by virtue of his strength, wit, and luck. Now that his strength was far behind, and his wit probably was useless, would Ling Han listen to his explanation? It would be just a matter of luck. But luck was too unreliable. Still, could it be possible for a fifth-tier heavenly venerate to suddenly appear at this instance and order Ling Han to stop? There wasn't any fifth-tier heavenly venerate, but there was one sixth-tier heavenly venerate. It was only that Lin Xiaoyang obviously had no intention of coming forward. Ling Han. Pum! Rong Yang flew out from the ground. He had broken arms and legs and was covered in blood, but his fighting spirit nevertheless shot up to the skies. He glared at Ling Han angrily and had not the slightest intention of stopping the battle at all. Ling Han turned his head and glanced at him. I see that you have also been deceived by another, and this villain is none other than him. He pointed at Jiwu Heavenly Venerate. Jiwu Heavenly Venerate humphed. I don't know what you are talking about. Ling Han, don't be too presumptuous. Lord Rong is the only son of the sixth-tier Heavenly Venerate, Rong Tianyu. He wanted to suppress Ling Han using a sixth-tier Heavenly Venerate. At this moment, Rong Yang scolded Jiwu angrily. This is my battle. Don't mention my father. Ling Han laughed loudly and said to Rong Yang, You are considered a tough one. You have my respect. His figure jumped out at this moment and charged murderously towards Jiwu Heavenly Venerate. Your opponent is me. Rong Yang didn't appreciate it and intercepted Ling Han. Jiwu Heavenly Venerate hurriedly retreated. How could he be Ling Han's match? Ling Han directly channeled the four direction seals, and pang! He sent Rong Yang flying into the air with a single punch, and then quickly caught up with Jiwu Heavenly Venerate, stretching out his hand to grab the opponent's neck. Jiwu Heavenly Venerate almost went mad with anger. After all, he was a Heavenly Venerate and a third tier at that. Yet, Ling Han actually used a method, like an eagle catching chickens, to bully him. How condescending was this? But he didn't dare to make any objections and quickly took advantage of the chance created by Rong Yang's attack to escape. However, with such a big gap in strength, how could he run? A huge force quickly struck, causing all the hair on his back to stand on ends. He couldn't escape. He mused inwardly that he could only be compelled to turn around and fight, and so boom, he brandished a Heavenly Venerate tool and channeled a Heavenly Venerable seal. But this was one of the 7 more widely known seals, and could only increase his power by 4 times. Not to mention fighting against the 4 direction seals, even if Ling Han didn't use any secret technique, but merely blasted out 4th tier power, it also wasn't something that Jiwu Heavenly Venerate could match. Pung! His counterattack immediately fell apart. Ling Han's big hand, which he was already using to grip his opponent's neck, was hardly affected at all. Chapter 2839. 2839, A Strange Change. Chapter 2839. 2839, A Strange Change. 2839, A Strange Change. One of the 3 big shots of the celestial realm was now being hoisted like a dead dog. This made the karmic life Heavenly Venerable, Jiwuming, and the others all feel rueful. However, the large black dog was clapping his paws gladly. He had been longing to see this scene for a very long time. Ling Han! Rong Yang roared. No matter what, Jiwu could also be considered his subordinate, and now he was being humiliated like this, so it was also an embarrassment for him. However, he had already been thrashed severely by Ling Han, so he actually was already embarrassed. Ling Han shook his head. Don't be excited yet. Let's see what this guy would say first. Jiwu Heavenly Venerate sneered. Ling Han, I only rue that I had not killed you earlier, which was what led to today's disaster. N. Rong Yang faltered slightly. With his intelligence, how could it be that he could not deduce the fact that the 2 of them had known each other long before from these words of Jiwu Heavenly Venerate? Furthermore, they had an existing grudge between them. Rong Yang thought deeper could it be that it was Jiwu Heavenly Venerate who had egged Rong Xingquan on to come here? His motive was so that he could use the latter as a tool for his crime. It was you who egged on Rong Xingquan to come here. Rongyang questioned Jiwu, Heavenly Venerate. Jiwu, Heavenly Venerate, had already thrown everything on the line. He only laughed loudly, his eyes glaring at Ling Han in fury. Junior, I have had countless chances to kill you before, but I have underestimated you too much and thought that you were nothing but an ant, and disdained for making a move on you personally. Very sorry I have disappointed you, Ling Han said calmly. Looks like you do not have the slightest intention to reflect on the error of your ways. If so, I can't be bothered to waste any more time, either. I'll just send you on your way now. Ling Han, there will come a day that you will find out that there will always be someone stronger and more talented than you. You are definitely not the strongest in this world. It was like Jiwu Heavenly Venerate was cursing him, tears of blood dripping from his eyes. He resented everything. He was filled with overwhelming resentment. Ling Han had been nothing more than the most negligible ant of the celestial realm, yet now he had turned around to subdue him, which filled him with defiance and regret that he had not killed Ling Han earlier. Ling Han humphed, frightening power surging from his right hand. Pung! Jiwu Heavenly Venerate was immediately blasted into a shower of blood. A Heavenly Venerate had died, but there was no movement from the heaven and earth, as if it was just a cat or dog that had died. Ling Han paused. Ling Han! Rongyang shouted in fury. He had not investigated the whole matter thoroughly yet, so why had you killed him? Ling Han was thinking pensively. He ignored Rongyang and merely swept Jiwu Heavenly Venerate's soul over to Rongyang with a wave of his hand. Whatever questions you have, you can find out the answers on your own. Rongyang was just about to speak, but after a moment of consideration, he still stretched out his right hand and grabbed Jiwu Heavenly Venerate's soul as he began to flip through his memories. His expression became gradually more livid because he had already flipped through the process of how Jiwu Heavenly Venerate had tricked Rong Xinquan into coming to Ling City, as well as the origins of the enmity between Jiwu Heavenly Venerate and Ling Han and the others. He now knew that the Rong clan had been manipulated by Jiwu Heavenly Venerate. How despicable! He wanted nothing more than to kill Jiwu Heavenly Venerate again. A mere third tier actually dared to manipulate a sixth tier force. That was too outrageously bold. Ling Han, though it was this villain that caused this event to happen, you have indeed killed a member of our Rong clan. This matter, you have to give our Rong clan an explanation. He suppressed his fury. It was indeed Rong Xinquan who had started this, but there was no member of the Rong Xinquan that would die for nothing. Ling Han ignored him because an intense change was taking place presently inside his body. When he had killed Jiwu Heavenly Venerate just now, Ling Han discovered that there was a powerful force that was surging into his body. When he sensed it carefully, it was actually the vitality of Jiwu Heavenly Venerate. Ling Han was very shocked. He had not been cultivating any kind of evil or demonic cultivation technique. So why would he swallow the life essence of Jiwu Heavenly Venerate? He had never heard that anyone who had advanced to the second tier would possess this ability. This kind of change was too sudden and too strange, so he was completely in no mood to pay any regard to Rongyang. Instead, he was focused on the change within himself. Jiawu's life essence turned into endless nutrition that was rapidly advancing the powers of dimension within every cell inside his body. If he could continue to advance like this, he probably would not need a few thousand years before he would be able to attempt breaking through to the third tier. Ling Han was not too pleased. This kind of ability shocked him, and even filled him with a kind of terror. This was equivalent to devouring other heavenly venerates and turning them into nutrition for himself. The rate of his advancement through the cultivation levels was astonishingly rapid. If this could be easily copied, wouldn't the whole world go crazy? Heavenly venerates would hunt down other heavenly venerates, creating rivers of blood. The Genesis world would soon be left with only a few scattered heavenly venerates who were the strongest. Ling Han! Rongyang roared in fury. Ling Han actually dared to ignore him. Wasn't it just defeating him for now? What was there to be so smug about? Ling Han snapped out of his daze and asked, "What kind of explanation do you want from me?" "Go to our Rong clan and beg for forgiveness on your knees," Rong Yang demanded. Ling Han instantly scoffed. "Are you an idiot? Could it be that you don't know it was Rong Xinquan himself who had come here? Moreover, he has also killed a member of our Ling clan. So I, too, should demand an explanation from the Rong clan, right?" Rong Yang was indignant. How could the life of a servant be compared to a member of the main branch of Rong clan? Let me be the mediator here." There was a long laugh, and Lin Xiaoyang appeared, Lin Piaoxue following closely behind. "Greetings, Lord Lin." "Greetings, Senior Lin." Both Ling Han and Rong Yang bowed in respect. This was a 6th-tier heavenly venerate, so who could afford to treat him with disrespect? Lin Xiaoyang raised his hand and said, "It was indeed Rong Xinquan who started this whole matter. With his character, there is a reason why he is dead." Rong Yang wanted to explain, but seeing how Lin Xiaoyang's glance swept towards him, he immediately fell silent. In front of a 6th-tier, there was no room for him to refute. Though he could not resign himself to this, since Lin Xiaoyang had already passed judgment, then he was not worthy to continue debating the matter, unless his old man made a personal appearance. "Rong Yang, come." Lin Xiaoyang beckoned Rong Yang over towards him. Rong Yang had no choice and could only leave with Lin Xiaoyang. Meanwhile, Lin Piaoxue winked at Ling Han and also turned around, leaving with her father. Ling Han. With the departure of the 3 great heavenly venerates, the Empress and the others all gathered around him. They were all pleased. Now that Ling Han had advanced another step further, Ling City now possessed a 4th-tier powerhouse, which would mean greater safety in this chaotic world. Ling Han very much wanted to ask someone else regarding this ability that he had suddenly gained, but the Empress had just advanced to the 2nd tier and had not killed any heavenly venerate before, so it was naturally impossible that she would know whether she had this kind of ability or not. And this was not something that could be easily experimented with. Oh, where should he find a heavenly venerate for the Empress to kill? Ling Han really missed the realm battlefield. If they were still warring with Hysteria now, the speed of his progression through cultivation levels would be very fast. He only had to breach the barrier between cultivation levels, and even attaining 7th tier would not take too much time for him. He instinctively felt that he could not let any outsiders know this, or it could possibly lead to great trouble. Ling Han set this matter aside for the moment, and found out after some queries that she had already set out 2 days ago, heading to various dimensions to harvest the power of dimension there, pioneering her own path of heavenly venerable tier. In Hunyo's case, she was still in seclusion. Apparently, she would not come out of seclusion unless she reached the 3rd tier. Calm returned for the moment. With Lin Xiaoyang stepping out to mediate, Rong Xinquan did not come to call for an accounting of old debts over the matter of Rong Xinquan's death again. But after several tens of thousands of years, Rong Xinquan appeared once more at Ling City. Chapter 2840, 2840 Fight. Chapter 2840, 2840 Fight. 2840 Fight. Fight. Ling Han looked at Rong Yang in surprise. He had not expected that Rong Yang would actually come to invite him to participate in some kind of fight. Rong Yang nodded. "That's right, a fight. There are over a dozen of us, and we suppress our cultivation level to a specific level, and then fight. The last standing will be able to claim the first place. Furthermore, before the fight, we will all sever a heavenly venerable seal, and the first place holder will be able to obtain these seals for himself." Ling Han was surprised. There were really heavy stakes on this fight. However, in a battle of equal cultivation levels, did he have any match? Wasn't this just delivering treasure straight into his hands? Ling Han looked at Rong Yang. Though his grudge with the Rome clan had been resolved by Lin Xiaoyang, his relationship with the Rome clan could not be considered amiable. Why would Rongyang push such a good opportunity onto him? Rongyang could tell the doubt in Ling Han's eyes. He smiled bitterly. I have no intention to choose you to profit. However, recently a monster has suddenly popped up. In a battle of equal cultivation levels, there's no one that is his match, and I lost very terribly. Oh! Ling Han was slightly surprised. Though Rongyang was not the strongest in his cultivation level, he had also accommodated a great many powers of dimension when he had been in the first tier. Under circumstances when both parties were equal in cultivation level, there should not be many that could defeat him. Could it be that it was either Xan Chihu or Wu Haoyang that made a move? Rongyang shook his head. We aren't idiots, so how could we fight them if it was them? That man's name is Meng Dong. No one knows his background, but within the cultivation level of the second tier, he can be considered invincible. Thus, you have come to find me? Ling Han looked towards Rongyang. Ling Han, you are already able to match a fourth tier when you are only in the second tier. However, this may not be an ability that you alone possess, Rongyang said seriously. In a battle of equal cultivation level, none of us could match Meng Dong. Afterwards, he relaxed the restrictions and allowed us to use third tier's power to fight him. As a result, we were still horribly defeated. In the end, he allowed us to fight him with fourth tier power again, but the result? Most of us still lost. And just like this, he has deceived us 3 times. Everyone has lost 3 heavenly venerable seals. Ling Han couldn't help but feel tempted. Rongyang said that there were over a dozen of them. So whenever Meng Dong won, he would be able to obtain more than a dozen heavenly venerable seals. And if it was 3 times, there had to be 40 to 50 heavenly venerable seals that he had obtained. Ling Han's great luck was already shocking enough, yet now he still only had 14 heavenly venerable seals, and 7 among them were the more widely known heavenly venerable seals, which was something that practically every single heavenly venerate possessed, so they could not be counted. They were both in the second tier, but the gap between them was quite wide. Come, let's go take a look then. Ling Han immediately decided. He really would like to see who, besides himself, could be so freakish. Ling Han did not call over the Empress, Hunyo and the others, and directly set out with Rongyang. He did not fear that Rongyang was trying to trick him, because he could traverse freely through the Genesis world. So who could stop him? Of course, Hysteria was also a party that could not be overlooked. It seemed to have set its eyes on him, and he kept encountering it in the void. After journeying for a few months, they arrived on top of a great mountain. There were a great many people gathered here, and they were all heavenly venerates. Ling Han was surprised. The present world was in complete chaos, and even heavenly venerates were all fearing for themselves. Why had so many people still come out, and so boldly and publicly at that? However, once Rongyang explained, Ling Han understood the reason. That was because all the heavenly venerates here came from powerful backgrounds. Either they had fathers or grandfathers who were 5th tier or 6th tier heavenly venerates, or it was their master or grand elder that was an elite of this level. As long as there was no power that could kill them all in one fell swoop, there only had to be one that managed to escape, and those heavenly venerates would unite in vengeance. What force in this world would be able to stand against that? Of course, if any of them were caught alone, it would be hard to say. Ling Han saw a great many energetic, young heavenly venerates who had only been cultivating for 1 to 2 epochs, and there were some even younger that had only been cultivating for tens of billions of years, yet they had already advanced to the 2nd tier or even 3rd tier, which was truly extraordinary. He couldn't help but feel rueful. Though the world was completely chaotic, this had also led to the rise of a great many prodigies. However, wasn't it said that there were only over a dozen people fighting? The number of people here was not just a dozen, but at least over 100. Even Rongyang was a little stunned. Previously, there had indeed been only over a dozen of them fighting here. Probably many people went to ask for help, unwilling to resign themselves to being deceived by Meng Dong, and wanted to win back their pride. In fact, they may even be having designs on those heavenly venerable seals that Meng Dong obtained, Rong Yang guessed. Ling Han nodded. That was at least 40 to 50 heavenly venerable seals, and even he was slightly tempted whether he should commit a murder and robbery. Rong Yang, is this the helper that you have invited? A yellow-robed young man walked over. He had a lanky build, and the aura exuding from him had also reached the 4th tier. Rong Yang nodded. He is Ling Han. Ling Han? The yellow-robed young man showed a hint of surprise. The Ling Han who broke records at the realm battlefield. That's him. Rong Yang nodded. Ha, Brother Ling, I am Qiu Jian. The yellow-robed young man clasped his hands in greeting towards Ling Han. I have long since heard of your name. Since he was treating him politely, Ling Han would naturally not behave arrogantly either. He nodded and also greeted him, Brother Qiu Jian. While they were chatting here, it also attracted the people around them. When they heard the legendary Ling Han was here, a great many people were intrigued. After all, the record that Ling Han had set in the past had really never been achieved before, and it was extremely possible that no one would ever match it. However, some newly promoted heavenly venerates expressed disdain towards Ling Han. They had only heard of Ling Han's legends, but had not witnessed his feats personally. Thus, their attitude was to doubt everything, and they thought that they themselves were the strongest. Ling Han, do you dare to fight us? Someone immediately issued a challenge towards Ling Han. This was a 2nd tier, heavenly venerate. He was indeed very extraordinary. He had only been cultivating for 10 billion years, and he had already reached this level. Merely in terms of speed, he really had surpassed Ling Han by who knew how many times. Hence, he looked down on Ling Han very much. A 2nd tier who had only reached this level in over an epoch? That was so weak. I, too, wish to fight with this legendary prodigy, another heavenly venerate said. He was only a 1st tier heavenly venerate, but the fight could begin after they suppressed their cultivation levels, so even if there was a big gap in cultivation level, it was no great issue. Me too. This was another heavenly venerate, a 2nd tier heavenly venerate as well. Challengers stepped out one after another, and there were as many as over a dozen of them. They all wanted to become famous by stepping on Ling Han's shoulders. After all, Ling Han had indeed left behind a legend in the realm battlefield in the past. Ling Han smiled. The main lead was not even here yet, and there were already people ready to present him with some heavenly venerable seals. He deliberately revealed a troubled expression. There is only one of me, but there are over a dozen of you. With how hesitant he seemed, everyone thought that he was afraid. This is not a group battle. We're going to fight one by one. That's right, we are not going to bully you. Do you dare? The people who had previously provoked him all exclaimed, wanting to egg Ling Han on to fight. Ling Han considered again, and then nodded. All right then. Those people who had challenged him were all overjoyed, but then Ling Han continued. However, I fear my divine might would scare you guys off. Thus, anyone who wants to challenge or fight me should step out and sever their heavenly venerable seals first. I am afraid that you guys will not be fighting later. This was his real motive. Otherwise, if he blasted a fighter to bits with just a single punch, would the others still dare to fight him? Who would be afraid? Those fighters all declared, their heads raised high. Chapter 2841. 2841 Tricked. Chapter 2841. 2841 Tricked. 2841 Tricked. Rong Yang couldn't help but shake his head and gained a new awareness of how black-hearted Ling Han could be. Fuck, this guy really had a string of tricks ready for others. Rong Yang felt extreme sympathy for these rookies. Later, they would definitely be beaten down to the point that they lost all confidence in themselves. But who asked them to be so self-centered and think that only they were the strongest in this world? This could be considered paying a price to learn a precious lesson. "All right, I will be the referee," a fourth-tier elite said. His name was Zhuang Bai, and his cultivation level was the peak stage of the fourth tier. He was also the one with the highest cultivation level here. In an all-out battle, even Ling Han might not be his match. A fight naturally had to have rules. Every person who fought would have to sever a heavenly venerable seal from their mind in advance, and one of the more widely known 7 seals was definitely not accepted. They were really everywhere, so who would need them? But heavenly venerable seals could only be transmitted and could not be taught, so how could others know that the heavenly venerable seal severed was one of the more widely known 7 seals? Simple. One only had to sever that heavenly venerable seal first, and then display those 7 seals. Though their display would be very blurred, who had not mastered these 7 seals, no matter how fuzzy they were, they could still be sensed. All of them severed a heavenly venerable seal each, and sealed it in a unique stone. Otherwise, there was nothing that could contain a heavenly venerable seal. Ling Han was no exception. He thought for a moment, and then severed the 9th seal. It could not be helped. The only 9th grade seals he had were the more widely known 7 seals, and what was left after that was 8th grade seals. Everyone sealed the heavenly venerable seals in a stone slab. They could not be stored for too long. After all, they had already been severed. However, it was completely possible for them to last for the period of time needed for a few fights. These stone slabs were secured by Zhuang Bai, and there were also a great many heavenly venerates who would stand guard, so there was no need to worry that Zhuang Bai would embezzle it. Otherwise, there would be no further need to stay in this circle in the future. Who's first? Ling Han swept an eye at those more than dozen challengers. Me. I'll do it. Everyone was scrambling over each other. Ling Han had only severed a heavenly venerable seal, and who knew just how many he had? If they were too late, wouldn't there be none left? Ling Han chuckled. No need to be so troublesome. All of you can fight at the same time, and I can also save myself some time. Without waiting for these people to agree, Ling Han moved first. Pung, pung, pung. He threw 14 punches in a row, and those challengers were all sent flying, completely losing all power to battle. Done and dealt with. Ling Han clapped his hands, walking toward Zhuang Bai. Since he had one, he naturally had to retrieve his reward. Everyone was surprised and shocked by Ling Han's mad barrage of blows. No one managed to even react, though they had all heard how powerful Ling Han was, and how he was a freak that had broken records. No one had expected that he would really be as strong as this. Those were 14 heavenly venerates, and they had all suppressed their cultivation level to the 1st tier, so this was a battle of equal cultivation levels, and they still couldn't even withstand a single blow. Ling Han took 15 stone slabs in total from Zhuang Bai and opened them one after another, absorbing the heavenly venerable seals that were sealed within into his mind. He immediately began comprehension. If he could not quickly master these seals, they would very soon disappear. Including the 9th seal that he himself had severed, he would have to comprehend them one by one. Since he had already severed it, there would not be the slightest bit of memory left of it, and comprehending it again would not be any faster. Those heavenly venerates that had been sent flying all gradually got back to their feet. They were all looking at Ling Han indignantly. They had failed from the get-go. The main lead, Meng Dong, was not even here yet, and they had already lost a battle. How would they have any more confidence to face Meng Dong? Ling Han sat on the sidelines, focusing on comprehending these newly obtained heavenly venerable seals. He discovered that aside from that 9th seal of his, what the others had actually taken out were actually all 9th grade seals as well. They were not the more widely known 7 seals, but every level of heavenly venerable seals would have 111 of them. Hence, aside from the more widely known 7 seals, there were another 104 heavenly venerable seals which had boosting effects of less than 10. However, Ling Han was unconcerned because he was ambitious and wanted to comprehend 999 heavenly venerable seals. Naturally, he would not mind the level of the heavenly venerable seal. Of course, it would definitely be better if he could get higher grade seals now. He boosted his divine sense with regulations of time, and his divine sense channeled at high speed. Merely in over a dozen days, he had already mastered these seals at a preliminary level. But to completely master them was definitely not something that would only take a few days. Shockingly, he discovered that when he strung these seals together, there were actually 5 that could resonate. Combination seals. Unfortunately, even if 5 ninth-grade Heavenly Venerable seals were combined together, the boost they could provide would only be a mere 13 times, which was still less than any 8th-grade Heavenly Venerable seal that he had. It was fine. Now, there were 5 combination seals, and this could expand to 10, 50, or 100 seals in the future. Furthermore, when he cultivated, the more Heavenly Venerable seals he had, the better, and only in battle would he need a seal with great explosive power. Since he had the time, he continued cultivating. Right at this moment, the main lead finally arrived. An overwhelming aura surged out. Pum! A figure also descended from the skies. He did not control his power at all, and when he landed, he crashed ruthlessly into the great mountain. Pum! This great mountain was instantly shattered with a loud boom. Aside from devouring metal in its complete state, was there anything else that could withstand the power of Heavenly Venerable Tier? Instantly, everyone rose into the air. Ling Han was also forced to interrupt his comprehension. He frowned. He had just been cultivating peacefully, so who had disturbed him? Meng Dong! Quite a number of people shouted, looking towards that domineering guy. Meng Dong was a young man with a strong, heavy build. He looked around, his eyes filled with carelessness. He was clearly only a 2nd-tier Heavenly Venerate, yet his appearance still caused a great many 4th-tier Heavenly Venerates to feel wariness. Very good. With so many people here, I am sure that I will be able to obtain even more Heavenly Venerable seals. He laughed loudly, seemingly brimming with confidence. Arrogance! Someone immediately declared disdainfully. Meng Dong looked over and beckoned with a hand gesture. Do you dare to fight? For trash like you, I can accept stakes of 1 to 10. How about it? That man instantly looked tempted. The stakes were 1 to 10. He only had to win once, and he would be able to win 10 Heavenly Venerable seals. Where else would he find a deal as good as that? All right, I will fight you. He severed a single Heavenly Venerable seal, and Meng Dong did indeed sever 10. The 2 of them began their battle afterwards, but that man was no match for Meng Dong at all. In a few moves he was defeated. Meng Dong sneered, walked over, and took the spoils of the battle that belonged to him. However, he did not stow it into his mind, but rather swept an eye over his surroundings. Is there anyone else here who wishes to fight? It's still the same stakes, 1 to 10. Forget about 2nd tier. I can't be bothered to bully them. Any 3rd tiers? You do not have to suppress your cultivation level, and I will play around with you guys. Originally, there were some 2nd and 1st tiers that were moving restlessly. They all had the invincible aptitude within their respective cultivation levels, but they were certain that they could not match a 3rd tier with just 2nd tier power. Hence, they naturally did not dare step out to take the challenge. Is there no one? This is truly disappointing. Meng Dong shook his head. Then I will relax the rules even further. You guys can add on a few more people, and even 10 is no problem. Meng Dong, you are too arrogant. Zhuang Bai exclaimed. Chapter 2842. 2842 Meng Dong. Chapter 2842. 2842 Meng Dong. 2842 Meng Dong. Meng Dong glanced at Zhuang Bai and said smilingly, You are a peak stage 4th tier, and I am no match for you for now. These were honest words, but Zhuang Bai was not pleased at all hearing them from Meng Dong. Wasn't this implying that Zhuang Bai would very quickly be surpassed? Facing a 2nd tier being so disrespectful in front of him a fourth tier, he was outraged. But so what? Though Meng Dong was not his match, there wasn't much of a difference between them in strength. At most, Zhuang Bai would only be able to wound him, and there was no way he could inflict serious injury on his opponent. So it was natural that his opponent could act arrogant in front of him. Meng Dong, are your previous words serious? A third tier heavenly venerate asked. Of course, Meng Dong replied proudly. All right, count me in. This third tier stepped out. Count me in as well. Another third tier stepped out. Me too. One after another, there were soon 10 of them. Very good, come fight me. Meng Dong took out 10 stone slabs which had heavenly venerable seals sealed within them, and tossed them casually over to Zhuang Bai. Those 10 third tiers also served a heavenly venerable seal from their minds respectively, and sealed them in special stones, which they then handed over to Zhuang Bai. If they won, each of them would be able to win a single heavenly venerable seal, and if they lost, the 10 heavenly venerable seals would all belong to Meng Dong. Begin, Zhuang Bai announced. The 10 third tier heavenly venerates immediately moved. However, they soon paled in shock because Meng Dong's battle prowess far exceeded their imagination. The moment they started fighting, he had already laid absolute claim to the upper hand. They fought back with great effort, using all kinds of powerful techniques, but it was completely useless under the suppression of absolute strength. Very quickly, they were all defeated. Thanks, Meng Dong said smilingly. Those 10 third tier heavenly venerates could only look livid. Having lost when there were 10 third tiers fighting against a single second tier heavenly venerate, what else could they say? Anyone else? Meng Dong asked with a grin. No one answered. There were not many that could suppress Meng Dong even among fourth tiers, and it was clear that Meng Dong could not possibly agree to fight with this kind of elites. Ha ha ha! If no one is going to fight, there will be no need for me to come here next time. Meng Dong shook his head, looking at everyone with a gaze filled with disdain. Everyone was extremely displeased. Any single one of them could be considered to have succeeded in youth, and someone was treating them with such disdain now. It would be strange if they did not feel displeased. I don't mean to look down on you guys, but you people are truly a bunch of trash. Meng Dong laughed loudly, turned around, and was just about to stride off. I'll have a fight with you. A voice suddenly rang out. Meng Dong turned his head and looked towards the speaker. Involuntarily, he was surprised. A second tier? Haha! Do you have confidence in yourself that is off the charts, or has your head been kicked by a donkey? Ling Han smiled calmly. Aren't you a second tier yourself as well? Previously, he had not spoken at all because he was still comprehending those 15 heavenly venerable seals. But thinking of how he was going to fight Meng Dong, he would definitely have to sever a few heavenly venerable seals, so what was the need for him to go the extra mile? Meng Dong was surprised. He couldn't help but laugh out loud. That's right, I am indeed a second tier. But could it be that you did not see what happened just now? Even 10 third tiers joining forces are no match for me. Ling Han nodded. I did see, which is why I think that you should be able to become my opponent. Meng Dong's eyes involuntarily narrowed, having cultivated to the heavenly venerable tier, which one of them would have a head that was kicked silly by a donkey. Thus, Ling Han clearly knew that Meng Dong possessed strength that could suppress the third tier, yet still dared to challenge him. So he had to also be a supreme freakish genius himself. All right, come fight me. Meng Dong casually tossed out 10 stone slabs, sealed with heavenly venerable seals. The same rules, stakes of 1 to 10. There is no need to take advantage of you. We'll go with stakes of 10 to 10. Ling Han also tossed out 10 stone slabs. Everyone gave an "oh," stunned by Ling Han's generosity. Of course, there were also a few people that were secretly muttering that Ling Han was an idiot. He clearly could have gone with stakes of 1 to 10. However, what they did not know was that Ling Han was filled with confidence in himself. So what difference would there be for him to take out 1 or 10 seals? You're very confident, Meng Dong declared, his eyes narrowed. As humans, if we do not have confidence in ourselves, what meaning would there be left? Ling Han countered. Haha, that's right. One should have more confidence in themselves. Meng Dong laughed loudly. Let's fight then. The two of them handed the heavenly venerable seals over to Zhuang Bai, and then rose into the air, standing with a distance of 300 meters between them. For heavenly venerates, this bit of gap could be considered completely non-existent. Just by raising their hand and delivering a strike, this distance could be breached. I hope you truly have some strength and won't disappoint me, Meng Dong said. So do I, Ling Han said. Then get ready to face this strike. Meng Dong moved and delivered a palm strike towards Ling Han. Pum! As Ling Han exchanged a punch with him, a powerful shock wave surged out. Both of them retreated, and they were practically equal in strength. In this instant, both their expressions became serious. Their opponent's power was not inferior to their own. Ling Han was stunned. Indeed, he was not the only one who could battle with a disadvantage of 2 cultivation levels. This Meng Dong's freakish talent was actually superior to even the Empress, because the Empress could not battle with a disadvantage of 2 cultivation levels. However, what he did not know was that Meng Dong was even more shocked because Meng Dong's cultivation level was peak stage 2nd tier. Though it was hard to decide who was stronger between the two of them in this exchange. One of them was in the early stage of the 2nd tier, yet the other was in the peak stage of the 2nd tier. Was this not enough to show the problem? Interesting. Meng Dong looked at Ling Han, fighting spirit burning hotly in his eyes. He already knew that he was slightly inferior to Ling Han, but he was not discouraged, because the clash between heavenly venerates was not a pure clash of cultivation level and power. The secret techniques and seals they had mastered were also a factor. Hence, though the level of his power and Ling Han's was presently equal, if he truly went all out, the gap would be abruptly widened. Meng Dong had a resolute nature and immediately channeled a heavenly venerable seal. At the same time, he was also channeling a secret technique. With a light roar, he took in a long, drawn-out breath, and the mystical power of heaven and earth was manipulated by him before spurting out violently. Xiao, xiao, xiao! Countless weapons shot out of his mouth, charging towards Ling Han in a barrage. Fuck! Ling Han's face instantly darkened. He did not care whether Meng Dong had done it deliberately or otherwise, but wasn't he spitting at him now? A battle was a battle, so is it really appropriate of you to spit at your opponent like this? Bastard! Ling Han roared in fury. He charged towards Meng Dong and threw a punch, fists of fury already being deployed, as well as being boosted by the 14th seal. So his power increased to 29 times. Pung, 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 pung. Countless weapons were demolished by Ling Han, and he appeared to be invincible. Meng Dong couldn't help but feel stunned. This battle prowess was truly overbearing and vicious, and even he would have to dodge. He was very decisive and instantly retreated, refraining from a full-on confrontation with Ling Han. However, he was still non-stop spitting from his mouth. Golden swords, silver spears, halberds, daggers, and the like were all barraging Ling Han madly. To spit at your opponent to cause disgust, I have never seen someone as shameless as you, Ling Han exclaimed angrily. When these words fell, Meng Dong's face darkened as well. What do you mean by spit at your opponent to cause disgust? This was his heavenly venerate technique, the 10,000 weapons technique, an ultimate technique that he had invented. He could use it without using his hands or legs, so it could be considered incredibly practical. Of course, if he spat too much, it was inevitable that a bit of saliva would be spurted out as well, but just how much was this amount? Moreover, every single inch of skin and hair of a heavenly venerate was a supreme treasure, and saliva was greatly nutritious too. It was refreshingly fragrant like a great herb. So how could it be called disgusting? Damn you! Meng Dong was also infuriated as well, spitting out saliva, No, spitting out weapons even more intensely. Chapter 2843. 2843, so you too are. Chapter 2843. 2843, so you too are. 2843, so you too are. Meng Dong was very aggressive. He did have a basis to be forceful. He was a second tier who already possessed strength that could match a fourth tier, and just how many of such prodigies actually existed in the entire Genesis world? Did even Lin Yolian, Xian Chihu, and Wu Haoyang have such strength in the past? This kind of prodigy should have been famous throughout the world, yet it was like he suddenly popped out of a crack in the ground. No one knew his background at all. All they knew was that his name was Meng Dong. Perhaps even Meng Dong was just his alias. But faced with Ling Han, Meng Dong was actually at a disadvantage, retreating continuously under Ling Han's mad barrage of fists of fury. Charge! He roared in fury, his mouth spitting out various types of weapons nonstop. This was extremely terrifying. Even a third-tier Heavenly Venerate could be insta-killed, but Ling Han could forcefully shatter the weapons that were launched at him with just a single punch. He drew a precious tool. It was an ancient mirror, with 7 seals flickering within and exuding a blinding brilliance. Ling Han couldn't help but close his eyes. This light had very strong destructive power to the eyes physically, and even a powerful Heavenly Venerate like himself could not look at it directly. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Meng Dong charged over, sending a palm strike right at Ling Han's head. The air of primal chaos descended, and it was like he was a demonic god. This Heavenly Venerate tool was not an attack type, but rather a supplementary type, which showed just how great Meng Dong's confidence in himself was. The Heavenly Venerate tool was only a supplementary tool, and he himself had strength that could suppress everything. Ling Han released a battle cry. He did not draw the divine demon sword, but rather waved his fists in a powerful attack. From a certain angle, his battle prowess when using fists of fury was superior to when he used the divine demon sword because he could only strike out powerfully with his force when he was using the divine demon sword. But the fists of fury was a secret technique that he had invented himself, so it could boost his battle prowess to a greater degree. Under the shining brilliance of that blazing light, Ling Han really couldn't see anything. Not only could he not open his eyes because of this light, but even his divine sense was cut off. If it did not have this kind of effect, this supplementary type precious tool would be too useless. Ling Han was completely throwing punches based on his battle instincts. His skin could feel the force behind blows, and his sense of danger allowed him to react in the most logical way. Pung, pung, pung. The two of them battled intensely, going all out in every single move, bent on defeating their opponent. All around them, people were watching anxiously. They had extremely complicated feelings. They hoped that Meng Dong could lose just once, but at the same time, if Meng Dong lost, that would mean the degree of Ling Han's freakish talent was superior to even Meng Dong's, and this was even more unbelievable for them. However, no matter how complicated their feelings were, it could not have the slightest effect on the battle situation. Ling Han was gradually getting the upper hand. "Looks like I have underestimated you," Meng Dong said, light of intelligence flickering in his eyes. Ling Han smiled slightly. "Yet I have overestimated you. Just that bit of strength is not worthy of making you my opponent." "What wild boasting!" Meng Dong sneered. The seals flickering on his body suddenly dispersed, and 3 seals on his chest lit up at the same time instead, instantly causing his battle prowess to spike madly. Boom! He struck out with a palm, and even the heaven and earth were trembling. "Combination seals?" Ling Han asked casually. "That's right. They can boost my battle prowess to 32 times. Meng Dong declared proudly. Ling Han laughed. "You are not the only one to have mastered combination seals." He, too, dispersed the 9th seal that was presently activated, and he channeled the 4 direction seals as replacement, and his power began to spike wildly as well. 39 times. Previously, Meng Dong's battle prowess was already slightly weaker than Ling Han's, and now a great gap had appeared in their power again, so he was naturally even more inferior to Ling Han now. Originally, he was only at a slight disadvantage, yet now he was at a clear disadvantage, and anyone could tell this with a single glance. If things went on like this, Meng Dong would lose. Not bad, you're truly not bad. Looks like this powerful move of mine must be used on you. Meng Dong laughed loudly. He suddenly stretched out his right hand and grabbed over at Ling Han. This hand grew exponentially in size, as if it had turned into a piece of the heaven and earth. Destructive heavenly origin, he called out inwardly. Boom! The large hand descended, and everyone felt a boundless feeling of repression rise up in their hearts, as if even their souls were about to be forcefully ripped apart. What kind of technique was this? How could it cause such pressure even on heavenly venerates? Ling Han also felt an indescribable pain, feeling as if even his head was about to explode, but right in the next instant, a power suddenly surged inside his body and expelled this feeling of pressure completely. He had no time to wonder where this power had come from. He hurriedly threw a punch in response to that giant hand. Pum! This giant hand was blown up with a single punch from him. Setting aside that repressed feeling, this move was only very strong, but not overwhelmingly so. Meng Dong showed a hint of disbelief. In fact, he even stopped. He could not accept the fact that this strike from him had failed. But after only an instant, realization dawned on him. So you two are what? Ling Han was surprised and asked, Why don't you finish your words? Meng Dong nodded, yet said, Hee, it is no wonder you do not know, because you have not awakened yet. No rush, no rush. When there comes a day that you understand, there will naturally be no need for me to explain anything. What did these confusing words mean? Ling Han frowned. Speak clearly. Ha. Consider this win yours, little brother. Meng Dong forfeited the battle and directly turned around and left. With a single step, he crossed 500 kilometers, and then his voice floated towards him slowly. I forfeit. The words that he had previously spoken had been directly communicated to Ling Han's mind via divine sense, and only these last words, I forfeit, were directly spoken out loud, which everyone heard. Meng Dong had lost. Though everyone had expected this, hearing Meng Dong admit it personally would still incite some surprise because he could actually still last for a very long time with his condition. Furthermore, once he endured Ling Han's burst of power, who knew what changes would take place in the battle situation? Who knew? Maybe it would be Meng Dong that was stronger when the next heavenly venerable seal lit up, right? Ling Han stood motionless and silent. He was pondering the words that Meng Dong had said. What did he mean? Judging by his tone, it seemed like they should know each other and were in the same group. But Ling Han definitely did not think that he had encountered Meng Dong before. He could swear to the heaven and earth. Strange, the events that had taken place recently were all too bizarre. For some reason, Ling Han could not control his own divine sense, and actually entered into the void when he had been breaking through to the second tier and even encountered hysteria. Moreover, he had also gained the ability to devour the life essence of a dead heavenly venerate, and a mysterious power had even arisen within his body just now. He could not explain all of this, but it seemed perhaps Meng Dong would understand. Ling Han did not pursue him. The other party's strength was not much weaker than his own, and he would not be able to force out answers from him. Moreover, it was clear that Meng Dong had no intention to take the initiative to explain things to him at present. He turned around and walked towards Shuangbai. He had best retrieve the heavenly venerable seals he had won first. Everyone looked on, all feeling envious. Those were 20 heavenly venerable seals. Some already wanted to make a move, but they still forcefully suppressed the urge. They could not break the rules here. Otherwise, Would there be others who would want to fight in future? Ling Han sat down on the sidelines first, and then completely refined all 20 heavenly venerable seals. With the passing of time, they would disperse if he did not do so. Others began to fight as well. Without a monster like Meng Dong, there was finally no one that would cause further disturbance. Of course, now that Ling Han had replaced him, it was probable that there would be no one that would want to fight him. Chapter 2844, 2844 Mending the 14th Seal. Chapter 2844, 2844 Mending the 14th Seal. 2844 Mending the 14th Seal. Since there was no one else to fight, Ling Han could only leave helplessly. Rong Yang expressed much gratitude towards him for resolving a great problem like Meng Dong. From now onwards, the grudge between Rong clan and Ling Han and Ling City was considered settled. Ling Han knew that this was because his potential was too terrifying, so the Rong clan was willing to give him some face. Of course, if it were not for the fact that he had the Lin clan backing him up, they would definitely have just directly crushed him into the dust. Because they could not kill him now, and were also wary of his future strength, it would be better to settle things peacefully and turn an enemy into a friend. Ling Han was fine with this. In any case, the main culprits, Zhu Heavenly Venerate and Rong Xingquan, had already been killed, so if they wanted to become friends instead of enemies with him, then so be it. When there are other fights in the future, remember to invite me, Ling Han said laughingly. Rong Yang's expression involuntarily darkened. If he really brought Ling Han to more fights in the future, he would definitely be cursed out by the others, just like how Meng Dong had been. Just how many people would he bring to ruin? Of course. Rong Yang said half-heartedly, but he had already made his decision. He definitely could not take Ling Han to participate in this kind of event in future. Ling Han did not give up. I might be busy sometimes, so my wife could go as well. Rong Yang's expression was even darker. It was not that he had never fought the Empress before. Though she was a second tier, she was strong enough to match a third tier. She, too, was a super freak. Rong Yang sent off Ling Han like he was sending off a bringer of misfortune. It would be best for him not to have too much contact with this kind of cunning guy. Just like this, Ling Han returned to Ling City. On the surface, he was all smiles and cheery. He had obtained 20 heavenly venerable seals on this trip, which could be considered to be great profit. However, there was a hidden worry lying at the depths of his heart. Just what was going on with his body. He did not tell anyone about this matter. He began seclusion, digesting those 20 heavenly venerable seals, but after refining them, he discovered that 3 of these seals were duplicates. Thus, he immediately severed them again and transmitted them to the Empress. In this manner, the number of heavenly venerable seals he now possessed was as many as 35, but the newly obtained seals were all 9th grade seals. Bunch of cheapskates. However, after piecing them together, those 5 combination seals had actually increased to 9. If they were channeled simultaneously, the boost to his power would reach as much as 26 times, and this was considered 7th grade. Not bad at all. Ling Han nodded. 9th grade seals would have the advantage of 9th grade seals, and that was that everyone did not value them too much. They were also the most common ones, and it was possible that they would become the first combination seals that he would successfully piece back together. Just think about it. 9 seals would boost his battle prowess by 26 times. Then, when 110 of them were all collected, just how many times would they boost his battle prowess? 1,000? 10,000? Ling Han couldn't help but feel expectant, but it was not clear just how long it would take before this day came. No one was an idiot. If he battled and won repeatedly, who would still come to fight him? It is no wonder that so many have started to walk the path of robbery and murder. There is no need for rules, and one would be able to take possession of the seals that others have earnestly comprehended through much difficulty for themselves. It is indeed the fastest way to improve oneself. At present, I can refine other heavenly venerates and snatch all of their cultivation level and seals. For me, this is a massive temptation, and even I can't help but be tempted to take this shortcut. However, would this kind of forceful robbery of others' cultivation level really help me to climb to the pinnacle? Ling Han thought that this was too uncertain. What one robbed was ultimately not what they had obtained through their own cultivation. Perhaps for a short while there would be a visible soaring of cultivation level and strength, but after a long period of time, the hidden problem of having unstable foundations would be exposed. It would be better to take it one step at a time. Ling Han spent tens of thousands of years and finally mastered all his newly gained heavenly venerable seals completely, turning them into his own, and only then did he come out of seclusion. In the outside world, the Rong clan had already joined an alliance with the Lin clan. In the case of the Ying clan, it had yet to be confirmed because the Ying clan's appetite was too big. They actually wanted the princess of the Lin clan to marry into the Ying clan. Even Lin Xiaoyang could not decide this matter. Lin Yulian was Lin Luo's favored daughter, and if she herself was not willing, who would dare to force her? When the news spread out, everyone was saying that the Ying clan was shameless. Lin Yulian was the strongest prodigy of eternity, and it was only a matter of time before she advanced to the 7th tier, and she might even get as far as 7th tier in the future. You, a 6th tier force, actually dared to have designs on a supreme elite that would be a 7th tier in the future. Weren't they shameless? Hence, the alliance with the Ying clan continued to be delayed. On the other side, the matter of Lin Piaoxue marrying Rongyang was also proven to be just a rumor. Who was Lin Xiaoyang? He was the son of a 7th tier, and he himself was also a 6th tier. Would he be so short-sighted and use his own daughter to trade for an alliance? Because this alliance was centered around the Lin clan, and added with the fact that Lin Luo was also a 7th tier. This alliance was called the Lin Alliance. To be honest, Ling Han and the others were also members of this Lin Alliance, but their strength appeared quite negligible. Heavenly venerates were still dying, but because the majority of heavenly venerates had now gathered together in alliances, the number of deaths had also greatly decreased. It was very rare for battles to start between alliances should both of them fight so hard that they were both damaged severely. It was possible that a third party could swoop in and take advantage of their weakness to eliminate them. This would be paving the way for someone else for nothing. In this manner, the world was showing signs of becoming peaceful. The world had always been like this, Chaz returning to peace and peace overturned by chaos. Ling Han began another long period of seclusion. In any case, he was idle at the moment. As he cultivated, he attempted to mend the 14th seal. In its incomplete state, it already had a boost of 29 times, so it was extremely likely that it would be a high-level seal of the 6th grade or even 5th grade once it was mended. He continued to communicate with the heaven and earth, extracting void particle energy to mend the 14th seal. The progress was extremely slow, but there was indeed some progress. Heavenly venerable seals were superior to regulations. They were means that a heavenly venerate used to communicate with the fundamental power of the Genesis world in the first place, so it was natural that they could be mended with the 6 great fundamental powers. Ling Han couldn't help but feel rueful. If he attained the 7th tier, he would be able to extract the 6 elements at the same time with just a wave of his hand, so the efficiency of mending a heavenly venerable seal would definitely increase a great many times over. 700 million years passed, and the repair of this seal was halfway done. It could provide a boost up to 32 times. Another 2 billion years later, the repair had reached 3/4 of completion, providing a boost of 39 times. Merely this was already equal to the 4 direction seals, and this was just a single seal. This was astonishing. Ling Han couldn't help but feel expectant. If he advanced to the 3rd tier, would an even more powerful seal appear automatically before him? Another 4 billion years later, the 14th seal was finally fully mended, providing a boost that leapt straight to 47 times. This was a 5th grade seal. If Ling Han could obtain even more 5th grade seals, what kind of astonishing effects would combining them bring? He really wanted to fight higher-level heavenly venerates. Ling Han felt rueful. However, his present battle prowess could just barely match peak stage 4th tier. Should he encounter a 5th tier, he would definitely be done for, so it would be best that he did not go and deliver gifts. He came out of seclusion and discovered that Hunyo had already broken through to the 3rd tier. Meanwhile, the Empress had also refined the 3 heavenly venerable seals he had given to her. And what was even more pleasantly surprising to him was that his daughter had actually returned. Already. In the past, he had spent a whole epoch to finally complete extracting the power of dimension of 999 dimensions, which was as far as he could go. Afterwards, he shattered his core of power, and only then did he manage to take another step forward, turning his body itself into a model of the Genesis world and cutting out an even wider path for himself. Why had Ling she already reached the limit after cultivating for around 10 billion years only? Chapter 2845, 2845, Primitive Dimension. Chapter 2845, 2845, Primitive Dimension. 2845, Primitive Dimension. Ling, she had already obtained the best conditions in the world before she was even born. Both her parents were heavenly venerates, her natural aptitude was excellent, and she had only been born after the Empress had gone through close to 100 million years of pregnancy, absorbing enough heavenly venerable tier nutrition, and already being a celestial king upon her birth. Just how amazing was this? Ling Han had also retrieved a small world and instilled it into her body. Not only could she then have a burst of pseudo-heavenly venerable tier battle prowess at any time, she could also study the power of dimension constantly. How great was that? Under such excellent conditions, Ling she had reached her limits after only spending around 10 billion years. Ling Han could not believe it. "Precious daughter, why have you returned so quickly?" he asked hurriedly. "Father, I have decided not to walk the path that you and mother have walked," Ling she said. Though her voice was gentle and calm, there was a firmness that said no one could change her mind, which resembled Ling Han. Ling Han sighed. He himself was that kind of person, so he had no plans on convincing her otherwise. Instead, he asked, "What kind of path will it be?" "I plan to turn the small world inside my body into a true dimension," Ling she said. "I have a feeling that this will be stronger than if I extracted the power of dimension from 10 or even over 100 dimensions." Ling Han did not speak, pondering the possibility and future prospects of this kind of path. Facts had proven that those like the Empress who had directly extracted the power of dimension of various dimensions and fused it into a core were not as strong as Ling Han, who was nurturing various dimensions within his body. But Ling Han's situation was too unique. Even if others wanted to take the same path, it would not be possible. They would only destroy themselves. However, in Ling Shi's case, she had had a small world implanted in her from the very beginning, and it would slowly develop into a dimension. This was more or less the same as hysteria, judging from a certain angle. However bright her future would be, how far she could develop this dimension would depend on her own abilities. Low level, medium level, high level, or a transcendent dimension. This was very important. It was equivalent to a first tier possessing the power of dimension of a whole dimension, which could still grow exponentially, and this was very astounding. Of course, this could not be compared to Ling Han. What was nurtured inside his own body was an entire Genesis world. Precisely because of this, Ling Han's progress was overwhelmingly slow. Who knew how long it would take for him to take another step forward? However, the increase to his battle prowess with every step forward would also be exceedingly great. This was not about him. It was about his daughter. Ling Han nodded slowly. "This is a path that you have chosen yourself. Since you have made your decision, You must resolutely and determinately continue on this path." "I know." Lingxi nodded. After a slight pause, she continued, "That's right, father. There is someone that I would like you to meet." Ling Han glanced at his daughter and couldn't help but feel a sense of alarm rise up in his heart. Fuck! There was a sliver of romantic sentiment hidden in his daughter's expression. Not good. His daughter was about to be snatched. Damn it, who was this damn brat? "All right, let that bra boy come," he said, suppressing his anger. She smiled lightly with pursed lips. Very soon, she brought over a young man. Ling Han was surprised. Originally, he had thought that the one who had gained Lingxi's notice had to be in the heavenly venerable tier, at the very least. But this young man only had a cultivation level that was equivalent to the immortal palace tier, and his strength could be considered extremely weak. "My name is Fu Tianqing. Greetings, sir." This young man clasped his hands in respectful greeting towards Ling Han. He was polite, yet neither haughty nor humble, appearing to have very good bearing. Interesting. Even if Ling Han had kept his aura under wraps now, to say nothing of an immortal palace tier, even celestial kings would feel weak in his presence as they were completely overwhelmed by his aura. They would not even be able to articulately speak, and would definitely not be as calm as this guy in front of him. Ling Han felt a sense of approval for this young man, but he immediately warned himself mentally that this was the man that intended to snatch his daughter away. It would not be wrong to even consider him his enemy. He made close queries about Fu Tianqing's past, and discovered that the latter actually had had similar experiences as Ling Han. He, too, had come by opening the sky of a small world, and had only used several million years to attain the immortal palace tier, which was very, very extraordinary. Because of Lingxi's gentle suggestion that did not accept refusal from him, Ling Han accepted Fu Tianqing as a disciple. He gritted his teeth. Wasn't this just welcoming the wolf into his own home, making it even more convenient for Fu Tianqing to court his daughter? But it was not good to keep a daughter with him now that she was grown up. Fu Tianqing was really very extraordinary. With the pouring of a great volume of resources, he swiftly advanced to the celestial king tier in just 1,000,000 years, advancing so fiercely that even Lu Yutong and the other women clicked their tongues in amazement. This brat was not all that handsome, but his bearing was amazing, graceful, and polite, so all the women had high expectations for him and treated him like he already was their son-in-law, which also caused Ling Han to almost yell with fury. Another 100 million years passed, and Fu Tianqing had already advanced to the 9th heaven. Even though he had a later start, he had already surpassed Ling Han's other disciples, and breaking through to the heavenly venerable tier was close at hand. With this kind of son-in-law, Ling Han actually should be quite satisfied, but whenever he thought that his beautiful daughter would be married off to this brat, he always felt the temptation to brutally beat Fu Tianqing up. Right at this moment, Ling Han received a message from Lin Xiaoyang, asking him to visit the Lin clan immediately. Ling Han set out as soon as he received the message. Aside from himself, Zhou Heng and Chu Hao were also present. "I just received some news that a primitive dimension has appeared inside the void," Lin Xiaoyang said. "What?" Both Zhou Heng and Chu Hao instantly stood. How is that possible? The void should be unable to accommodate anything. The expressions of both the great 6th tier elites changed drastically due to their great shock. That is indeed the truth. Lin Xiaoyang nodded and said seriously, "This is what Father has found out, and it has also been confirmed by the other 7th tier lords." At this, both Chu Hao and Zhou Heng had nothing else to say. Even 7th tiers had already confirmed this, so there was nothing to be doubted about this. "Is there anything special about this dimension?" Ling Han asked. Lin Xiaoyang glanced at Ling Han in approval. This brat would always ask questions that hit the nail on the head. He nodded and said, "In this dimension, there's a great amount of what we call heavenly venerable stone." Ling Han knew what heavenly venerable stone was, a unique stone that could be used to seal heavenly venerable seals. Apparently, aside from the mind of a heavenly venerate, only this object was capable of containing a heavenly venerable seal. However, by itself, this actually did not have much value. The heavenly venerable stones that we have obtained here actually originate from that primitive dimension. They have struggled free of the power of dimension and appear in the void at certain timings before descending here. Lin Xiaoyang explained slowly. He paused and then glanced at Ling Han and the others. By itself, heavenly venerable stone does not have much use. Aside from allowing the divine sense and techniques of heavenly venerable tier to pass through it, it could not be any more ordinary. However, Father has discovered that some ancient relics of that primitive dimension are nurtured inside these stones, like the young of the true dragon, supremely valuable medicines, primal chaos divine metal, and most important of all, there are also heavenly venerable seals. Hearing these words, the expressions of Ling Han and the others all changed at the same time. Then the value of this heavenly venerable stone would be astonishing and would give rise to a full-scale competition over it. Then this primitive dimension will become an extremely important strategic location, Chu Hao said. Zhou Heng nodded. It will be attractive to all heavenly venerates, and it can be foreseen that great battles that will leave bodies scattered everywhere will take place continuously. Yet Ling Han said, the void is Hysteria's territory, and it can traverse the barriers between dimensions, a world where it reigns supreme. If we ventured to that primitive I-dimension inside the void, would we then be attacked by Hysteria? Chapter 2846 2846 Heavenly Venerable Stone Mine. Chapter 2846 2846 Heavenly Venerable Stone Mine. 2846 Heavenly Venerable Stone Mine. It was already not just once that Ling Han had encountered Hysteria in the void. He could be considered once bitten, twice shy. He had no choice but to keep up his guard. Lin Xiaoyang nodded. The void is indeed Hysteria's territory, but its main body is presently fighting Father and the others intensely, so it can only mobilize its doppelgangers. Thus, its battle prowess would only be at the 6th tier at most. We are completely able to match that. At present, there were around 106th tier heavenly venerates in the flaming frost realm in total. This was an astonishing power. It was definitely no problem for their combined forces to battle Hysteria's doppelgangers. Lin Xiaoyang and the others discussed the matter, while Ling Han listened from the sidelines. Though he was incredibly freakish, he clearly was not yet qualified to take part in this kind of discussion at present. In any case, he had made his decision. He was definitely going to this primitive dimension so he could obtain more heavenly venerable seals. It was not just the Lin Alliance. Every force was discussing this primitive dimension that had suddenly popped up. Everyone was doubtful. How could there possibly appear a dimension inside the void? It should be known that the void was filled completely with the fundamental power of the Genesis world. It was extremely violent, and only 3rd tier heavenly venerates and stronger could traverse the void. Otherwise, even 2nd tier heavenly venerates would be in danger. Yet now it was said that there was actually a dimension lying right within the void. How could this be believed? But while they did not believe it, various forces still set out respectively. Ling Han also brought the Empress and the others, with Lin Xiaoyang and other 6th tier heavenly venerates clearing the path as they headed towards that primitive dimension. The 6th tier was too strong. They discovered that dimension in the void merely over a dozen years later. Pu. They entered into this dimension, and when they passed through the dimensional barrier, it was like they had been squeezed into a bubble. Moreover, once they entered, they discovered that there was no energy of the void in this place. Instead, it appeared relatively peaceful. This kind of peace was only relatively speaking. There were still surges of an energy storm, but even the lowest level of Celestial King tier could tolerate this. Of course, this was the limit. Should an ascending origin tier enter this place, they would immediately be ripped into shreds by these wild waves of energy. Actually, it was also very dangerous for lower-level celestial kings to enter here. It was best that they had attained third heaven and above. In that case, there would basically be no problems. It was precisely like that. This was a completely barren place, where there was no existence of living beings. When nurturing life, it definitely had to start from the weak before growing stronger, right? But living beings below the celestial king tier could not survive here. So how was life supposed to come into being? Unless it was an existence that possessed celestial king tier strength from birth. Ling Han and the others began to carry out large-scale construction here, building a fort that belonged to them. This was a wonderful time to stake a claim to territory. Otherwise, with the passing of time, the territory would have been divided long ago, and that was the most important resource here. It could be foreseen that carnage would begin not too long later. With the power of heavenly venerates, a colossal base which could withstand the energy storm here was built. In this manner, even people with low cultivation levels could be alive and kicking here. They just couldn't leave. However, as time passed, particular defensive tools capable of withstanding the energy storm here would definitely be developed. Ling Han naturally brought over all the heavenly venerates of Ling City here, and after the base was constructed, they began to venture out and explore, searching for heavenly venerable stone mines. In the Flaming Frost realm, there were pitifully small amounts of heavenly venerable stones, and they were all scattered here and there. But here there were whole mines of heavenly venerable stones, and could be mined on a large scale. Their luck was not too bad. They discovered a vein of, or which could be mined, near their base. Why was there a need to construct a base? Naturally, it was so they could have ordinary people come here. And why was there a need for ordinary people to be here? This was because mining would need their labor. Couldn't heavenly venerates do it? Of course they could, but it would be too wasteful of their time. Though heavenly venerable stone did not have any other unique traits aside from being able to cut off heavenly venerable tier divine sense, this thing was actually extremely fragile. If heavenly venerates were to forcefully mine them, the whole vein of or would crumble with a bang. In this way, even divine metal would be shattered, what more celestial king tier great herbs and heavenly venerable seals. They would definitely be destroyed as well. Hence, there was a need for a great amount of manual labor, mining the stones carefully, just like how mortals would be mining. Now, various great forces were staking territorial claims. For the moment, they wouldn't come into conflict yet. But as territory continued to be claimed, what would come next would definitely be the eruption of great conflict over the remaining veins of ore. Stones were endlessly excavated and then delivered to Ling Han, Zhou Heng, and the others. They cut open these raw stones, obtaining the good stuff hidden within. However, what was disappointing was the fact that inside most of these stones it was still stone. Of course, they had not come out with completely zero results. They had still mined out the seed of celestial medicine inside the stones, and it was a supremely valuable medicine at that. This was no ordinary celestial medicine, but had rather been tempered by the fundamental power of heaven and earth, and was greatly beneficial even to heavenly venerates. This kind of great herb definitely could not exist in the Flaming Frost realm, because celestial medicine belonged within the range of regulations, which could not be surpassed. What use would they have for heavenly venerates then? But the great herbs here had long since died. Then, through the boundless passage of time, they absorbed an ocean of fundamental power, turning into great herbs that would be effective even on heavenly venerates. This kind of discovery stunned even Ling Han, Zhou Heng, and the others. However, the production rate of this kind of great herb was too low. They had cut open tens of thousands of raw stones, but they had only obtained one such great herb. And in the case of heavenly venerable seals, the chances were even slimmer. Only 1 out of 1,000,000 would contain a heavenly venerable seal. They continued to accumulate experience, and discovered the good stuff they could obtain would increase the nearer they came to the core of the vein. The production rate of supremely valuable medicine and seals increased quite a few times over this, was speaking in relative terms. In truth, the chances were still pitifully low. Aside from supremely valuable medicines, there were also valuable things like divine metal or even devouring metal. It was as if this dimension was a massive treasure trove. Aside from feeling overjoyed, everyone also became more worried. At present, everyone was well off, and there was no shortage of mines, but when the mines they had control over were completely emptied out, just what kind of great war would erupt then? If Ling Han was honest with himself, even he thought that there was no way he would shrink back, and he was willing to contend with others until the end for the sake of mines. After several 100 million years of peace, an industry quietly flourished, and that was the sale of heavenly venerable stone. That was because the chance of heavenly venerable stones producing valuable items was pitifully low, so some forces decided simply to take out their reserves and sell them. The greatest unique trait of this heavenly venerable stone was that it would not allow heavenly venerable tier divine sense to penetrate them. Hence, this kind of business was feasible. One could buy a heavenly venerable stone and bet on it to see if it would produce any valuable item. It was possible that one would spend an exorbitant amount of money only for it all to go to waste, but it was also possible that it could produce an astonishingly valuable item. In comparison to the ups and downs of cutting open the stones, selling the raw stones was more stable. Hence, more and more forces began to imitate them, and it actually became a massive market. Of course, star stones could not possibly buy the raw stones. Instead, one would have to use divine metal. Though it was practically useless to heavenly venerates, it was considered a kind of currency at the very least. After all, it was a necessity if one wanted to forge a heavenly venerate tool. Gradually, even a field of study appeared, and that was study of the raw stones. What kind of raw stones could possibly produce treasures? Through studying the vein pattern and the time they had taken to form on the raw stone, it was indeed possible to increase the chances of obtaining treasures from the stones. This had extremely great implications. If it was possible to mine accurately with every turn, that would be equivalent to gathering an endless amount of wealth repeatedly, and one's own cultivation level and strength would soar exponentially. Under such circumstances, Ling Han also eagerly focused his energy to begin studying this field. Chapter 2847, 2847 Superpower. Chapter 2847, 2847 Superpower. 2847 Superpower. After several 100 million years, Ling Han had only obtained 3 heavenly venerable seals. It could not be helped. There were too many heavenly venerates here. The Lin clan, Chu clan, Zhou clan, and Rong clan all had a number of heavenly venerates, and Ling City also had a great many. Added with the very low rate of production of heavenly venerable seals, 3 seals was already extremely impressive. And precisely because of this, the raw stones that the Lin Alliance had dug out were all used by themselves. There were none that were sold. Now, they could only actively explore new or veins. Ling Han went into seclusion. There were several 100 raw stones laid around him. These were the last few remaining. Some had even been bought from other forces. There were also some stone scraps beside him. Those were the scraps of raw stones that had been cut open, which he was using as reference. Yet this thing really had no rhyme or pattern. Some raw stones looked to be of excellent quality, with clear vein patterns. Logically speaking, they would definitely produce some valuable treasure, but after cutting them open, one would be greatly shocked. They were completely empty. There were also some raw stones that looked rough and battered, yet actually hid supremely valuable medicines or even heavenly venerable seals. It could only be said that raw stones that looked better would have slightly higher chances of producing treasures, while raw stones that looked poor would have pitifully low chances. This could not be considered a pattern at all, because as the number of raw stones decreased, it was already impossible to use divine metal to buy those stones that looked excellent and could possibly produce heavenly venerable seals. Instead, One would have to buy them with the blood of heavenly venerable tear or even supremely valuable medicines. It was because someone had extracted a 4th grade heavenly venerable seal from it, which caused what could be considered a terrible conflict, leading to the deaths of over 100 heavenly venerates. From this, everyone knew that even 4th grade heavenly venerable seals could emerge from raw stone. If 4th grade could be produced, then what about 3rd grade or even 2nd and 1st grade seals? It should be known that Ling Han was already considered a freakish prodigy, but among the heavenly venerable seals he possessed, even the highest level seal was only of the 5th grade, increasing his battle prowess by 47 times. It was also rumored that someone had extracted a small beast from a raw stone before. It had already grown into a ferocious beast of heavenly venerable tier in merely tens of thousands of years, and was overwhelmingly strong. Additionally, there had once been a supremely valuable medicine extracted, allowing a 4th tier grade elite that had stagnated for a considerable amount of time to break through and advance to the 5th tier. Going from the 4th tier to 5th tier was an absolute leap. Just look at Lin Yulian and Xian Chihu. They had not advanced from the 4th tier to 5th tier even after a whole epoch, which showed just how hard it was to break through on this level. This news caused the price of better-looking raw stones to spike greatly. Some stones were so expensive that even 6th tier heavenly venerates would frown. Just buying one would mean having to empty out all of their coffers. The problem was that no matter how good the raw stone looked, it could still be completely empty once cut open. Then, one would really be coughing up blood at that. Raw stones would only become rarer and rarer, so Ling Han very much wanted to master the ability to see through raw stone so he could obtain the greatest amount of profit at the lowest price possible. He continuously studied, his hands holding scraps of stone or raw stones, comparing them. Was there actually a unique ability for him to cheat and penetrate the layers of stone that even heavenly venerable tier divine sense could not pass through, and see everything that lay within? After several hundred years, Ling Han shook his head. This was really a beautiful dream. Since he could think of this, how could it be that others would not be able to think of the same thing? His strength was comparable to the 4th tier, but there were still 5th tier and 6th tier elites who were stronger than him. Why was it that he would succeed where others failed? Was he stronger than them? Hold on, there really was one aspect that he was superior in. A thought came suddenly to Ling Han. His greatest pillar of support was the countless dimensions inside his body, which allowed him to become a small-scale Genesis world himself. Since he was the master of a whole Genesis world, he should be able to master everything. Seeing through a stone should be a piece of cake, right? A thought occurred to him, and he felt that it was possible that he had found the right direction. He attempted to stimulate the power of dimension inside his body, communicating with the raw stone. The raw stone inside his grasp immediately crumbled. This thing was something that even a celestial king could easily shatter, so how could it possibly withstand the power of heavenly venerable tier? Ling Han couldn't help but grin. If it directly exploded, would there be any need to explore this further? He took another raw stone and carefully controlled his power. Wang. Each cell in his body lit up one after another. That was the powers of dimension, and they were twinkling like a sky full of stars. When he had stimulated all the powers of dimension inside his body, his consciousness actually entered into a different space. He was stunned for a moment before ecstasy showed in his expression. This was the inside of the raw stone. He had succeeded. It actually was really possible. However, Ling Han immediately shook his head. Within this space, it was like his divine sense had sunk into a swamp, and every movement was difficult. He actually spent about 30 minutes to finally roam through the entirety of the raw stone. It was imperfect, but imperfection did not deny its excellence. It was still an extremely amazing breakthrough. Ling Han was sure that should he reveal this ability, the whole market would crash. The reason why stone gambling had been established was because no one knew what exactly lay within the raw stones, and those so-called stone gambling grandmasters one would only have slightly higher chances of making accurate deductions even now. Essentially, they were still just guessing. But it was different for Ling Han. He only needed around 30 minutes, and he would be able to see whether or not a raw stone actually contained anything. Perhaps an elite would kidnap him and use him as a tool for stone gambling. It was also possible that he would be killed off. An anomaly like him would have broken the rules and could not be allowed to exist. Ling Han decided that he could not tell anyone about this secret. He made a great many attempts afterwards, touching all of the raw stones here. Then he took one of them. He had seen a piece of divine metal here. His speed was slowly increasing, and he was sure that when he was more proficient, he would be done with just a simple touch of the raw stone. Next, he cut open all the raw stones one after another. As expected, aside from the one that he had taken out, all the other raw stones were completely empty, and he extracted a piece of divine metal from that last raw stone. He couldn't help but break into loud laughter, filled with excitement. A piece of divine metal naturally was not much, but it proved that this ability of Ling Han was not an illusion, but really genuine. It could bring him indescribable rewards. Let's go, and rake in great profits. Ling Han went out and was about to set out after calling over the Empress and Hunyao. However, when they saw how excited he was, Ling Han's daughter and Fu Tianqing also shamelessly followed him. Hence, Ling Han could only helplessly take the two of them with him as well. It was naturally no problem to bring his daughter. As for a brat like Fu Tianqing, though Ling Han had great approval of this guy's natural talent, just the thought that it was possible that he would be able to hook away his precious daughter made him feel an urge to kick him. They set out, heading to Culmination City. Originally, Culmination City did not exist, but since the emergence of the industry of stone gambling, Culmination City had turned from what was originally a small marketplace into this huge city, where a great many forces stationed themselves. There was no other industry here, only the sale of stones. Ling Han and his group entered the city, and wherever their eyes could see, there were lanes selling raw stones. The various forces all had their own raw stone lanes for clients to choose raw stones, but they could only choose. If anyone wanted to cut the raw stone open, they would have to buy it. There was no excuse of so-called picking up the wrong stone by mistake. The great forces managed Culmination City together, laying down a considerable number of rules for the public to adhere to. If anyone broke these rules, that would be equivalent to making enemies out of over 100 6th-tier elites. No one would be brave enough to do that. Hence, no matter how profligate anyone was, they would behave themselves. There was no one who would dare or could be exempted from the rules. In such an environment, it was not just 6th-tier forces that had raw stone lanes. 5th-tier and 4th-tier forces, too, had their own lanes. In fact, there were even some individual heavenly venerates that would occasionally find raw stones outside mines and come here to sell them off. To think that a dignified heavenly venerate would actually turn into a peddler, just the thought of it was quite amusing. But this was indeed what the Culmination City was like at present. Ling Han, where will we go first? Hunyao asked. Chapter 2848. 2848, Raw Stone Lane. Chapter 2848. 2848, Raw Stone Lane. 2848, Raw Stone Lane. Anywhere is fine, Ling Han said. They searched for a while and went into the largest raw stone lane nearby. The most valuable thing here was veins of ore, and the least valuable was naturally land. Without veins of ore, it was completely worthless. Hence, every raw stone lane inside Culmination City occupied an excessively large area of land. Once they stepped in, they saw various stones of different shapes and sizes all laid out. There were a great many people that were picking through the raw stones. There were heavenly venerates, and there were also celestial kings. After making their choice, some would pay and leave at the raw stone, while some would cut open the stone on the spot right after their purchase. Undoubtedly, Cutting open stones was an extremely exciting process. Everyone would be incredibly curious to see if there was any treasure that was hidden inside. If a treasure was revealed, someone would immediately be bidding on the spot, especially when the treasure was a supremely valuable medicine or heavenly venerable seal. That would definitely cause fierce competition, pushing the price to a frightful height. Of course, the grade of the great herb and seal would determine the final price. The group roamed as they liked, while Ling Han touched this and that stone. He would examine every raw stone he picked up for around 30 minutes, slow to the point of being annoying. All the raw stone lanes allowed their customers to study and touch the raw stones, as long as they did not damage the raw stones. Otherwise, the customer would have to pay compensation. At present, this belonged to the outer circle of the raw stone lane. The raw stones here did not look all that high in quality. Hence, the price would also be considerably cheaper. Every stone had the same price, but it was still as high as a piece of divine metal. This was already the cheapest. If they had entered the mid-grade or high-grade area, the raw stones there would be even more expensive, and every single raw stone would be priced individually, especially in the high-grade area. The raw stones there could not be purchased with mere divine metal, and could only be traded for supremely valuable medicines or even heavenly venerable seals. Because of Ling Han, who was burdening them, their speed was naturally extraordinarily slow. The Empress naturally could not be bothered with this, and directly sat down at the sidelines, while Hunyo had long since raced ahead of them. Only Ling Shi and Fu Tianqing were still following Ling Han. In Ling Shi's case, she was patient by nature, and in Fu Tianqing's case, rather than saying that he was accompanying Ling Han, it would be more accurate to say that he was accompanying Ling Shi. Thankfully, Ling Han was focused on exploring those raw stones for the moment. Otherwise, he would definitely be overwhelmed by great jealousy. Scrap, scrap, scrap. This was still scrap. Ling Han was not disappointed. This was the low-grade area. In the first place, the chances of treasure being produced would be low. If he could profit with just these few stones, his luck was really too good to be believed. Hee, what is this guy doing? Does he think that he is a grandmaster of raw stone? It can't be helped. The industry of stone gambling is flourishing now, and grandmasters of raw stone are too popular. There will always be people who want to stick this label onto themselves. That's right. At present, any grandmaster or alchemy or weaponsmithing is not as popular as a grandmaster of raw stone. It is inevitable that there would be crooks mixed in with the real grandmasters. Too many of them impostors. Behind Ling Han, there were a few young people that were conversing spiritedly, but their voices were very loud, loud enough for Ling Han to hear them clearly. Ling Han did not have the time to be distracted. He did not care about them at all. However, Fu Tianqing turned around and glared angrily at these young people. Ling Han was his master, his future father-in-law. These people were slandering Ling Han, so he naturally could not possibly just pretend he had not seen or heard it. What are you glaring at? That was a group of 5 young people, and they all had ribbons of iridescent light surrounding them. Clearly, they were all celestial kings. They were really very arrogant. It was clear that they had seen 9 ribbons of iridescent light wrapped around Fu Tianqing, yet did not show the slightest bit of respect at all. Within this primitive dimension, celestial kings were really very common. First heaven celestial kings were common, and so were 9th heavens. Added with the strict rules of Culmination City, celestial kings naturally needed not fear other celestial kings. No need to descend to their level, Ling, she said calmly. She had a quiet nature and did not like conflict. Fu Tianqing nodded and proceeded to ignore these people. Hey, there is a great beauty. That's true. She is remarkably beautiful. Pretty girl, why don't we have a chat? Unexpectedly, when the 5 of them saw how exquisitely beautiful Ling she was, they actually dared to tease her. Fu Tianqing was outraged and was just about to make his move. Don't be rash. Ling, she pulled him back. Culmination City strictly forbade fights these raw stones were too weak and fragile. So if a fight really broke out, without even involving heavenly venerable Tyr, merely a battle between celestial kings would be enough to cause an excessive amount of destruction. Hence, fights were absolutely not allowed to happen in Culmination City. If a fight really broke out, then no matter how many raw stones were destroyed, one would have to pay compensation for them. Fu Tianqing glared harshly at the 5 people and made his decision. Once these 5 people left Culmination City, he would definitely teach them a good lesson so that they would never be so proud as to forget themselves. What is it? You still dare to glare at us? These 5 people were truly arrogant. Seeing Fu Tianqing's displeasure, not only did they not behave themselves in the slightest, they instead acted even more arrogant. Do you know who we are? Hee, nothing but trash, Fu Tianqing said calmly. He was Ling Han's disciple, so how could his tongue not be sharp? Moreover, with the large black dog teaching him from the sidelines, it would be stranger if he was not devious. Yet this was what Ling Han had personally instructed, to have Fu Tianqing study under the large black dog. Though he very much did not want to hand over his daughter to another, there was no way he could convince his daughter otherwise. Thus, he decided to educate Fu Tianqing as much as possible, making him learn various ways of being black-hearted and shameless from the large black dog, so that he would become slicker, which was more suited for survival. Those 5 people were all infuriated. He actually dared to call them trash. Humph, just you wait. As long as you dare to come out from Culmination City, let's see if we won't beat you to death, they threatened. Fu Tianqing sneered. The person with the highest cultivation level among them was only a 4th heaven. They really did not know what was good for themselves. Clearly, they had some other basis for their arrogance. They had to have a powerful, heavenly venerable Tyr backing them. Otherwise, there was no way for a celestial king to come here on their own power at all. Sure, I will wait for you, trash. Fu Tianqing made a sweeping gesture, meaning that he was going to sweep these trash into the garbage heap. The 5 people all instantly bared their teeth. Why did this guy have such a venomous tongue? One of them wanted to retort, yet one of the others with sharper eyes elbowed him, looking towards the entrance. Young Master Lung is here. Instantly, the other 4 people looked towards the entrance and saw that there were 2 people presently walking over, an elder and a young man. The elder had gray brows and a gray beard, quite sage-like in demeanor. He crossed his arms behind himself, an expression of pride on his face. The young man was dressed completely in black, similarly looking very proud as well. Young Master Lung. Those 5 young people all approached. The young man in black robes nodded. Come and pay your respects to Grandmaster Niu. The 5 of them exchanged looks, slightly confused, but they then immediately bowed respectfully towards the gray-haired elder. Greetings, Grandmaster Niu. The gray-haired elder nodded. Rise. His demeanor was proud, putting on airs with his attitude. Grandmaster Niu. Could it be that he is that slightly acclaimed stone gambling Grandmaster Niu Buchuan? The 5 of them whispered among themselves. What do you mean by slightly acclaimed? Grandmaster Niu is a well-known stone gambling Grandmaster. That young Master Lung hurriedly corrected them. Yes. Those 5 lackeys all nodded, bowing repeatedly, completely different from how arrogantly they had previously acted. Young Master Lung has invited Grandmaster Niu. Could it be that he will be helping us cut open stones? One of the lackeys asked. Of course, another answered. Our young Master Lung truly has a reputation. He even managed to invite Grandmaster Niu. With the help of Grandmaster Niu, our gains today will definitely be amazing. They were all spouting words of flattery, and both young Master Lung and Grandmaster Niu smiled at this. Please help, Grandmaster Niu. Young Master Lung clasped his hands respectfully towards Niu Buchuan. Niu Buchuan nodded proudly. He roamed around, assessing each and every raw stone closely. After a while, he set his eyes on a raw stone and immediately walked over. Without caring that there was another hand that was laid on it, he stretched out his hand to take it. Chapter 2849. 2849 Stone Gambling. Chapter 2849. 2849 Stone Gambling. 2849 Stone Gambling. Feeling a person come too close to him, Ling Han instinctively moved and struck out with his palm. Niu Buchuin immediately grunted and took a few steps back. His face turned from red to white, and then he suddenly spluttered out a mouthful of blood, feeling such pain that he could not speak. He was only in ninth heaven, Celestial King. If it were not for the fact that Ling Han had realized something had been off and withdrawn some part of his power in the nick of time, this palm strike would have been enough to kill him several hundred times over. Ling Han frowned. A puny ninth heaven actually dared to disturb him. Grandmaster Niu, are you all right? That young master Lung hurriedly raced over. His name was Lung Xuran, and he was a first-tier heavenly venerate. Niu Buchuin felt a stuffy feeling in his chest and couldn't even speak. Even his eyes looked to be in danger of popping out. How dare you? You actually dared to wound Grandmaster Niu. Lung Xuran looked towards Ling Han, his expression arrogant. At present, what was the most popular profession? It was not alchemists or weaponsmiths and not formation masters, either, but rather grandmasters of raw stone. But it was not anyone that could become a grandmaster of raw stone. One would have to have an extremely strong spirit and be well versed in analysis to be able to distinguish whether treasure could be produced from a raw stone. Of course, even the most amazing grandmaster of stone gambling could not possibly pick accurately every single time. Ling Han also looked towards Lung Xuran. What grandmaster Niu? Scram! With the height that he was at now, there was already no need for him to make any explanations. Moreover, it was indeed he who had chosen that raw stone first. According to the rules, once someone had chosen a stone, others were not allowed to contend for it and had to wait until the first person gave it up. How dare you? Lung Xuran said menacingly. You dare attack a grandmaster of raw stone and speak so disrespectfully. Ling Han waved a hand at him dismissively, showing that he couldn't be bothered to give them any regard and telling them to scram quickly. Niu Buchuin finally got his breath back and said, Don't think that you are above everything else just because you are a heavenly venerate. It should be known that there will always be someone stronger than you. I don't believe that I can't deal with you. Grandmasters of raw stone were incredibly popular now, and were respected guests of various great forces. Everyone wanted to sell off the useless raw stones in their possession and keep the most valuable raw stones for themselves. In this manner, grandmasters of raw stone had become exceptionally important. To make a rough comparison, a grandmaster of raw stone was equivalent to an alchemist in the ancient realm, possessing outstanding status. Ling Han shook his head. No matter how popular a grandmaster of raw stone was, they were just using their status to bully others. Wasn't it the support of a heavenly venerate that they relied on? Previously, though his attention had been focused, concentrating on finding valuable raw stones, it did not mean that he had been completely unaware of things happening around him. He had only been ignoring them for the moment. He looked towards those 5 subordinates of Lung Xuran and glanced again at Niu Buchuin, his eyes becoming increasingly menacing. He possessed powerful battle prowess of the 4th tier. Merely with a glance, those 5 lackeys of Lung Xuran immediately exploded into a shower of blood. Culmination City had its rules forbidding battle. That was because battle could very possibly shatter raw stones. However, Ling Han had turned these 5 people into a shower of blood with just a single thought. This indeed did not comply with the rules of Culmination City, but Ling Han had 4th tier battle prowess, so it couldn't be helped. Who would really call him to a serious accounting because of this kind of trifling matter? It was just a few celestial kings that had died, so what did it matter? they dared speak so cheekily to his daughter. Even if they died, no one would pity them. Didn't they know he was a protective maniac? You? Lung Xiaoran was outraged. The other party actually dared kill in front of him. Ling Han ignored Lung Xiaoran. Was there a need for any reason for a heavenly venerate to kill a few celestial kings? Of course, he was not one to kill easily, but would only move if they deserved to die. Instead, he looked towards Niu Buchuan. You refuse to yield. I refuse. What is it? Do you dare to kill me as well? Niu Buchuan was not afraid. As a Grand Master of Raw Stone, he had prominent status and was the respected guest of various forces. Even a heavenly venerate would not dare to touch him. Ling Han smiles faintly. All right then, let's compete. Niu Buchuan sneered. Could it be that this brute wanted to battle him? What a joke! That would be too demeaning to his status. We will compete in stone gambling, Ling Han continued. What? Niu Buchuan was shocked. Ling Han wanted to compete with him in stone gambling? Had he taken the wrong medicine? You do not dare. Ling Han asked smilingly. Niu Buchuan sneered. Why would I not dare? I am worried that you will refuse to admit defeat. Ling Han shook his head. At times like these, even a ninth heaven celestial king would dare to act so insolent in front of a heavenly venerate. However, a so-called Grandmaster of Raw Stones could only be arrogant for a while, because there ultimately would come a day when the heavenly venerable stones in this dimension were mined completely. By then, Grandmasters of Raw Stone would be no different from trash. Sure, then let's gamble. We will each choose 10 raw stones, and see who obtains the highest value, Ling Han said. Haha, sure, Niu Buchuan sneered. In a fight, he was definitely no match for Ling Han, but in terms of stone gambling, then even 100 Ling Hans added together were no competition for him. What are the stakes? The Grandmaster asked. Ling Han grinned. If you lose, then you, and this brat, have to kowtow to me 10 times. Lung Xiaoran immediately wanted to object, but Niu Buchuan raised a hand to stop him. Turning his head, he asked, Young Master Lung, could it be that you do not trust me? This caused Lung Xiaoran to hesitate for a moment. He thought seriously, That's right, what is there to doubt? Agreed, Lung Xiaoran declared. But if you lose, you, too, have to kowtow 10 times to each of us. He was slightly expectant and excited. That was because Ling Han's cultivation level was clearly superior to his. So how pleasurable would it be to have a high-level heavenly venerate actually kowtow to him? Niu Buchuan also sneered. This man actually dared to treat him disrespectfully. Humph! Did he really think that he was all that impressive just because he was a heavenly venerate? Niu Buchuan was a Grand Master of Raw Stone. We have to have a time limit, Niu Buchuan said. 1 day. Sure. Ling Han nodded casually. He was getting more and more proficient at scanning stones. At the beginning, he had needed 30 minutes to complete a full scan, and now he only needed around 15 minutes or so. He was certain that this time would continue to shorten. Then let's begin, Niu Buchuan said. The two of them then began walking around in this area. Everyone knew that it would definitely be easier to discover treasures at the mid-grade and high-grade areas. But if they went there, there would not be much meaning to this competition. A confrontation and murder had occurred here, which naturally attracted the attention of many people. Some were asking their fellows as they made their way over. Lung Xiaoran had the intention to make Ling Han and his group even more embarrassed later, so he naturally made public the matter of their gamble. No way he actually dares to challenge Grandmaster Niu to stone gambling. That is Grandmaster Niu we're talking about here. I know who this is. His name is Ling Han. Ling Han? That guy who has broken records at the realm battlefield? Sigh, he's too arrogant. This is stone gambling, which has completely nothing to do with battle prowess. Haha, I heard that this guy is extraordinarily arrogant. I really anticipate seeing him kneel down in full public. Ling Han was a famous person, so it was natural that there would be those who recognized him. Once they heard about it, everyone shook their head. To say nothing of them, even Ling Shi and Fu Tianqing were worried. They knew that Ling Han's freakish talent in cultivation was indescribable, but this was stone gambling. There were more and more spectators gathered around them. Many people were no longer picking through the raw stones. They were just standing on the sidelines to watch, filled with anticipation. A prodigy of his era, a freakish genius. If he was really to kneel and kowtow in full public. Just the thought of that happening was exciting. Niu Buchuan picked up one raw stone after another, studying them closely, but a while later he would put them back. There was a whole day's time. He would not make his move rashly, but was taking note mentally. When it was about time, he would pick out those 10 raw stones that he considered the best of the lot. Chapter 2850, 2850 Stone Cutting. Chapter 2850, 2850 Stone Cutting. 2850 Stone Cutting. Ling Han was only touching as well, and did not choose yet. He wanted to take a look at all the raw stones in the low-grade area, and only then would he make his choice. With his ability, he only had to take a look at the raw stones that Niu Buchuan chose, and he would be able to accurately know what the latter's gains were. He would be completely able to make adjustments accordingly, and just win that slight bit more than the latter. Why did he have to do this? That was because Ling Han felt that tricking him just once would be too boring. This time he would be humiliating them in spirit, and next time he would deliver a severe strike at their finances. After making a full circle, Ling Han was slightly surprised. As expected, a book could not be judged by its cover, and it was the same for raw stones. Though this was the low-grade area, where chances of producing valuable objects were extremely low, he actually discovered a raw stone which actually contained a heavenly venerable seal. He did not know exactly what grade it was. Ling Han did not touch it, because once he made contact, the raw stone would explode. This would have broken the rules of stone gambling, and he would be directly considered as having lost. This raw stone was completely unnoticeable, and it was extremely unlikely that it would be taken by another, so he could just let it sit here first. It was no wonder that there were still customers frequenting this place despite it being the low-grade area. That was because everyone had the hopes of spending the least amount of money to obtain the greatest amount of profit. There were indeed people that could become wealthy overnight, but the chances of this happening were too slim. There were about over 10,000 raw stones here. Ling Han would make a note mentally with every stone he touched, and his speed was also getting faster and faster. Originally, he would have needed only 15 minutes. Now he only needed the time necessary for a few breaths. There was no other reason. Practice makes perfect. Previously, Ling Han feared that his power would be too great and would blow up the raw stone, but now his control was getting more and more accurate. However, he had just mastered this ability. Hence, at the end of the day, he had not managed to touch all these 10,000 stones, but only completed around half of this number. It was fine. He could not touch all of them, and Niu Buchuan was even less likely to do so. He had only looked at around 1/5 of this number. Yet, Niu Buchuan was not the slightest bit worried. Did Ling Han really think that he was already a grandmaster of raw stone just by touching the raw stones? Niu Buchuan naturally thought that Ling Han was just putting on an act, a cold sneer at his lips. When Ling Han knelt down to beg for mercy later, he would harshly taunt him. Lung Xiuran felt the same. He was even more familiar with Ling Han's origins than Niu Buchuan, and he was feeling very excited. An insufferably arrogant, supreme prodigy of the past was actually going to lower his head and kowtow to him. Just the thought of him caused his blood flow to speed up. It's almost the end of the day. The results should be revealed soon, right? I am truly expectant. The one and only Ling Han will be kneeling to another. This is enough material for me to brag about for the rest of my life. Haha, we are both witnesses. Everyone was whispering among themselves, all hoping that Ling Han would lose. It could not be helped. Ling Han had been too impressive in the past, creating records that no one could even touch at all, which naturally garnered the envy, jealousy, and resentment of the rest. The Empress glanced menacingly at all of them. They actually dared to hope that her husband would lose? They were probably tired of living, weren't they? She was too proud, and there was only one word that she had for people like these: kill. However, Hunyo was different. She stuck her hands at her slender waist. Just you people wait and see. Nyo's Ling Han will definitely win, and you guys can just wait to be embarrassed later. Some people fired back retorts, while others put on a facade of reservedness. For noble and dignified heavenly venerates to argue with another was very improper. Hunyo might not care about this, but they did. Ling Han, I will give you one last chance. If you admit defeat now, I will allow you to only kowtow 3 times, Nyo Buchuan said, smiling slightly. It might seem that he was compromising, but he was actually still insulting Ling Han. To have a prodigy kneel was the greatest insult in itself. What difference did it make if it was kowtowing 10 times or 3 times? Lang Xiran was clearly aware of this, so he did not object and merely nodded smilingly. Ling Han's eyes turned cold. Did they really think that he would not dare to kill a so-called Grandmaster of Rawstone? However, he would squeeze him dry first. Let's begin choosing our stones, Ling Han said calmly. Stubborn. Nyo Buchuan sneered. With his hand's guidance, 10 raw stones immediately fell into his grasp, and he then handed them over to a broad man next to him. This was a staff member of the Rawstone Lane. According to the rules of the Rawstone Lane, they could choose however they liked, but it definitely was not allowed to store the Rawstone Lanes into a spatial god tool or spatial celestial tool, because who knew if you would switch a Rawstone for another? Stone gambling was also the same. The difference was that the Rawstone Lane feared that you would trade a poor quality stone in exchange for a good quality one, and in stone gambling, the fear was that one would trade a good quality stone for a poor quality one. Taking a high-grade raw stone, wouldn't the chances of getting treasure be greatly increased? Then what justice was there to speak of in this kind of gamble? Ling Han swept an eye over these stones, and already saw clearly through all the stones the other man had chosen. He made a mental comparison, and he now knew just how many of these raw stones would reveal treasure, and how much this treasure would be worth. He seemed slightly surprised. This Grandmaster of Rawstone was really not just an empty boast. There were actually 3 among the 10 raw stones that Nyo Buchuan had chosen that actually contained treasure. However, that was as far as it went. Ling Han beckoned with a hand. Xiao, xiao, xiao. 10 raw stones also flew into his hands, and he handed them over to a staff member nearby. Open them, Nyo Buchuan said proudly. Together, an employee asked Ling Han. Ling Han smiled slightly. I'm fine with opening them together. After getting the agreement from both sides, the 2 employees began cutting open the raw stones at the same time. This kind of stone gambling was also very welcomed and supported by the Rawstone Lane because this kind of contest would bring a lot of popularity. With the boost in popularity, sales naturally would be boosted as well, especially when something valuable was gained. It would draw an illogical scramble over the raw stones. Everyone was gathered around to watch, seemingly even more nervous than the 3 people directly involved. Under a considerable number of eyes, the 2 employees began cutting open the raw stones. They were also stone cutters. They had already done this countless times and were already used to being the focus of the attention of heavenly venerates and celestial kings, though they themselves were only the equivalent of ascending origin tier. It was good now that they were used to it. Their movements were proficient, and layer upon layer of stone was scraped off visibly. This stone cutting was also a field of study in itself. One could not directly slice the stone in half with a single strike. Why was this so? What if there was a supremely valuable medicine inside? It was possible that the great herb would be directly slashed in half with a single cut, and this would greatly impact its medicinal effects. Just how much of a loss would it be? It was the same for heavenly venerable seals. With a single strike, the seal would directly appear, and it was not certain who would be the one to obtain it. Naturally, this could not be sold off on the spot. Hence, one had to be extremely careful in stone cutting, though it was just worrying for nothing most of the time. As layer after layer of stone scraps was removed, the raw stone also became smaller and smaller. In the first place, it had the effect of sealing off the divine sense of heavenly venerable tier, and was not all that impressive in terms of toughness. An ascending origin tier wielding a celestial tool was completely capable of easily slicing through it. "There's something," someone suddenly exclaimed, pointing at a raw stone. That was the raw stone that Nyobuchuin had chosen. "There really is. Judging by the luster, it should be a piece of divine metal. Though this can only be considered as neither profit nor loss. Even if there is something in only this one out of the 10 raw stones, this is already enough to prove that his label as a Grandmaster of Raw Stone is not just empty bragging." Everyone nodded. Stone gambling was stone gambling and was completely different from battle. No matter how great your power was, you would not be able to use it. However, when it was discovered that it was divine metal inside here, the stonecutter's speed of cutting immediately increased. Because of the hardness of divine metal, he naturally had no need to worry or be careful any longer. With a few slices, he cut open the entire raw stone. As expected, a piece of divine metal the size of a fist was revealed. It was completely jade green in color. Regulations took form and entwined around it, showing 9-colored celestial light. Chapter 2851. 2851 There Really Is Treasure. Chapter 2851. 2851 There Really Is Treasure. 2851 There Really Is Treasure. There was no shortage of heavenly venerates among those gathered here, so they naturally would not take a piece of divine metal to heart. They all looked towards the other stonecutter. The raw stone in his hands was continuously becoming smaller. As layer after layer of stone was scraped off, there still was nothing unusual to be seen. A scrap stone. Finally, the raw stone was only about the size of a pellet, and the stone cutter finally sliced the stone in half. It was still only white stone material on the inside, proving that this was only a scrap stone. Nyobuchuin laughed, his expression very arrogant, but he did not speak. There was no need to speak. Reality spoke louder than any words. Ling Han naturally would not be concerned. This was equivalent to 2 people playing cards, and he gathered his own hand of cards under the circumstances that he could see what his opponent's trump card was. How could he not win in this situation? Unless his opponent had heaven-defyingly good luck and had chosen the best for all 10 raw stones. Then, even if Ling Han could cheat, there was still no way he would win. Clearly, Nyobuchuin had not gained this ability yet. Continue. Both stonecutters took the second raw stone and continued cutting. They were both very experienced. It was clear that the first person had long since finished cutting, but he had not immediately proceeded to cut the second raw stone. Why was this so? Of course, it was for the sake of suspense and to keep the audience hanging. "Anyone fancy a bet?" someone suddenly said. "I will be the dealer. Those who bet on Nyobuchuin winning have stakes of 10-12, and those who bet that Ling Han will win have stakes of 10-15, and anyone who bets that the both of them will tie will also have stakes of 10-15. "I will." "Me too." This instantly drew the response of a great many people, even if the stakes for Nyobuchuin's win was only 1:1. 2. Practically everyone was betting that he would win. It could not be helped. He had already established a reputation. Moreover, was it not clear that he had already produced a piece of divine metal? This was a sure win. The Empress looked towards her daughter, and Ling, she responded with an exasperated expression. The one who was acting as dealer was Fu Tianxing. Otherwise, who else would become a dealer while clearly knowing that they would be losing money? Though Fu Tianxing did not know his master's accomplishments in stone gambling, He was familiar with Ling Han's character. If Ling Han did not have enough certainty, how could he dare to take on such a massive gamble? Since his master was filled with such confidence, what did he have to worry about? He would take bets and earn some profit. The second raw stone was soon completely cut open. Both of them produced scrap stones, and there was no treasure. This was very normal. Grandmasters of raw stone were not that amazing that they produced treasure at every turn. When it was the third pair of stones, they were still scrap stones. The fourth pair of stones was scrap stones as well. Now they were on their fifth. Hey, there is treasure again. When the stone cutter sliced down with his blade, someone immediately called out loud, "Teach you this is a great herb." Someone's voice was already trembling. "Careful, careful," the others warned hurriedly. They were not just simply watching. If there was any valuable treasure, they would scramble to buy it on the spot. If the owner wanted to sell, they would then be able to buy it off him at the first instance. There was no need for their warnings. The stone cutter was already beginning to be very careful. This great herb was too fragile and could be very easily damaged. As expected of Grandmaster Nyo, "Here's some more treasure. And it's a great herb at that. This is a huge profit." Everyone was musing ruefully. A Grandmaster of Raw Stone was really not just empty boasting. Nyo Buchuin smiled, looking sage-like and extremely proud. Only his heart was throbbing wildly because he could just barely determine whether there was treasure or otherwise inside a raw stone with his accomplishments, but he completely had no idea how much the value of its contents would be. Even so, his rate of accuracy was not very high. Usually his rate of accuracy would be only 10%, and 2 out of the 5 raw stones he had chosen this time had actually revealed treasure. This was indeed lucky. He naturally would not say this. He looked proud, as if everything was under his control. On the other side, Ling Han's raw stone was still scrap, and it had turned into bits of stone very soon. Lang Xiran was even prouder now, and said to Ling Han, "You can still forfeit now, but the number of times you will have to kowtow will have to increase to 5. Ling Han glanced at him. "If you want to die, you can just be frank. I can oblige you." Lang Xiran wanted to retort, but remembering Ling Han's terrifying strength, he forcefully swallowed the words that were right at the tip of his tongue. What was there to argue about this? When Ling Han knelt and kowtowed later, wouldn't Lang Xiran then have earned back all his pride? At that time, I'll see what else you have to say. Very quickly, this great herb was completely removed from the raw stone. Seems like it is not mature enough. Judging by those great herbs that had previously been revealed, this is a great herb to boost cultivation level, but it looks bluish, so it is very young. Even so, this is still a supreme treasure. This piece of divine metal was really worth spending. Everyone was rueful. Some were even directly making bids, hoping that Nyo Buchuin could sell this great herb off to them. Nyo Buchuin did not speak, yet when Lang Xiran spoke up, "Everyone, I am really sorry. It was I who invited Grandmaster Nyo, and he is also helping me to choose raw stones. At present, I have no plans of selling this." At this, everyone made no further bids. He had paid exorbitantly to invite a Grandmaster of raw stone, so whatever was cut out of the raw stones naturally belonged to him. "Continue," Ling Han said indifferently. For the 6th pair, both were scrap stones. For the 7th pair, both were scrap. For the 8th, scrap for both. For the 9th, they were both still scrap. Only the last pair was left. At this, even Fu Tianqing was getting nervous. Master can't have gambled too big this time, and trapped himself as well, right? Everyone shook their head. Only 1 more raw stone was left, so what would Ling Han have to get out of it to turn the situation around? Unless it is an even higher grade great herb. A prehistoric beast would work as well. It can advance to the heavenly venerable tier in just tens of thousands of years, which is truly frightening. Why don't you say that it is a heavenly venerable seal? Wouldn't that be even more amazing? Hee, this is just speculation in any case, so mere words are harmless. No one believed that Ling Han could turn this defeat around. This was the low-grade area, and the chances of producing treasure were already very slim. What more when it came to a supremely valuable treasure? There is something again. With another few slices, everyone gasped loudly. Of course, it was Niu Buchuan's raw stone again. The grayish-white stone material revealed a hint of crimson, flickering just like flames. Divine metal. Everyone nodded. Divine metal was not much, but it undoubtedly added even more brilliance to Niu Buchuan's halo. Sigh, just forfeit, someone suggested to Ling Han. There was definitely no point to proceed any further. Ling Han naturally was unmoved. He said to the stonecutter who had stopped, "What are you standing around for? Continue." The stonecutter scoffed, mentally. Could it be that you are still hoping that some incredible, amazing treasure will be cut out of this raw stone and completely reverse the situation in a single stroke? That was too naive, right? He naturally was not qualified to lecture Ling Han and could only obediently continue to cut through the stone. Ling Han, if you admit defeat now, you only have to kowtow 9 times. Lung Xuran laughed loudly. Everything was already settled now. Grandmaster Niu, you are truly extraordinary. Someone expressed goodwill towards Niu Buchuan. Could you also help me choose a few stones in these few days? Niu Buchuan stroked his beard, showing a hint of pride in his expression. Allow me to rest a few days. After all, choosing raw stones is still very tiring. I have already worked for a day, and I need a good rest. This was putting on airs. Everyone understood this, but it couldn't be helped because the guy was amazing. They could only continue to suck up to him. A soft exclamation rang out, and the stone cutter stopped moving the blade in his hand. What is it? Could it be that there is some treasure? Someone asked laughingly. The stone cutter had a strange expression. There really is treasure. What?